TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling, George Animal Steele. Thanks for being here today.
Talk slow. Easy.
Sorry about that. My very first question for you would be is how you got started in the wrestling business.
Not that slow.
Slower? Slower? Slow. How did you get started in the wrestling business?
Do you want to talk to George or Jim Myers? Let's just get it straight.
Jim Myers.
Oh, I thought so. Then we can talk.
All right, great.
If you want to talk to George, hey!
Slower.
You! Slow down. Jim can talk.
Okay, we'll talk to Jim.
Okay, I think you'll like that better.
I guess, Jim, how you got started in the wrestling business? Were you a fan of the business growing up?
You know what? This is going to blow your mind. It's probably not going to be a very good interview because I'm going to be very straight with you. I was not a wrestling fan. I never watched wrestling. I could care less about wrestling. I was into football. I was just graduated from Michigan State University, had blown a knee, and started teaching for $4,300 a year in 1961.
Right.
Not a lot of money, especially I have two children with a third one coming and a wife. So the first year I struggled through that. I played some semi-pro football for $100 a ball game, which was huge in that time. I mean, I ended up playing 12 games, so it's $1,200. And the guys playing in the NFL at that time was making about $4. So you know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Money wasn't the same as it is now. So that first year I struggled around. Then I went out looking for a job as a bouncer at a bar with a friend of mine. My friend was crazy, stupid. He was a huge wrestling fan. And so I found out three things that night. Number one, you don't take a friend if you're looking for a job as a bouncer at a bar. Number two, you don't drink a lot of beer if you're looking for a job as a bouncer at a bar. And number three, if you're sitting with a guy that's a jerk that loves professional wrestling, you're liable to end up calling a promoter at 2:30 in the morning and say, I want to be a wrestler. And that's how it started.
Wow.
Woke up Bert Ruby, the local promoter in Detroit. He invited me over the next day, had no idea what was going on. So I knock on his door. He comes to the door and he says, oh, beautiful. I know what I look like. So I figure, uh-oh, switch hitter.
Right.
And he invites me in. I meet his mother-in-law, his couple of, his wife and two children. And one of his children, by the way, a little side story,
right,
is Alan Ruby. Have you heard that name?
I don't know who he is.
Alan Ruby is the head lawyer for Barry Bonds right now. Whoa, heavy-duty people.
Right.
Anyhow, Bert Ruby, the promoter, invites me in, and I go in, and he you know, I feel better when I meet his family. Then he takes me into his office, and we start talking about and I don't know anything about the wrestling. I could care less.
Right.
He starts asking me questions, and then he says, take your shirt off.
Huh.
Oh, switch hitter again. And then I take my shirt off. He goes, oh, beautiful. He starts pulling on the hair of my body. Still no clue what's going on. But he liked the thickness and the hair in the body, and he's thinking wrestling, and I'm thinking what's going on. Anyhow, we talked a little bit. He never smarted me up to the business. He sent me was in Detroit area. He sent me to Windsor to work out with 4 or 5 wrestlers. This is old school. This is real old school.
Right.
So I go over there. It's in the basement of a Catholic church. They got a ring set up. They got all the workout stuff, and they go out and they work my tail off for about 30 minutes. I mean, heavy duty stuff, really heavy duty. Then they say, okay, let's get in the ring. And the deal is, in those days, they'd take you in the ring and beat you up. Well, I have been from the streets of Detroit. I had a learning disability, so my big success was fighting. So these guys are going to beat me up. Okay, let's go. So bing, 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 bing. About 45 minutes later, they said, listen, don't tell Bert, but we want to show you some stuff about the business. And they started showing me how to work a little bit. And right away, I lost respect for it. Because to me, they were challenging my integrity as an athlete. They were doing this, they were doing, and I almost turned around and walked out, to be honest with you. But I stick around, and after about 6 months, I only went to this basement about 8 times, and I was in the ring.
Wow.
But about 8 months into the ring, I started learning a lot about the business of working a match, and I developed a real respect for the talent of working a match, which is a lost art today. But back then it was an art, and how to control a crowd and all this stuff, and it really became a challenge for me, and one that I think that I mastered after a while, but I learned it from masters, and I didn't learn it at a stupid school with somebody that wrestled 5 or 6 minutes. I learned it in the back seat of a car. No, not with a woman.
Right.
In the back seat, coming back after shows with a 6-pack of beer and a log nog sandwich, or Bologna Blowout, and we'd have, as soon as they come out, as soon as they get in the car before we stop for the beer and the sandwich, they would start critiquing my match. And these are old timers that knew what they were doing. And they would critique, clip here, and make you feel like you were bare naked sometimes because they were really tough in what they were telling you, but they were right. And that's where I learned the business. Unfortunately, the kids today don't have that opportunity.
We can talk about that coming up. As far as what is the hardest aspect of learning the business? Was it the bumping or the psychology or
bumping? Who takes bumps? I found out early on it's better to give bumps than to take them.
Right.
I mean, come on. No, early on I took a lot of bumps. It was part of, you had to. And I was pretty good at some of that. I was never getting on the top rope and doing all that silly stuff.
Right.
But I could take a bump in relationship to the story to make sense, and I knew how to sell it. But the hard part of it was getting along with the people. And I'm not talking about the fans. I'm talking about the boys. When you're a young guy in the old school, you come in, you sit down, and you kept your mouth shut. And they come over, and when they wanted to talk to you, they talked to you. You didn't. I mean, it was if you didn't have respect for them, then you were out of there. And it was a business respect more than a physical respect.
What do you remember about your very first match?
It was Klondike Bill, and Bert Ruby come in, and he said, "I want you to go 10, 15 minutes and a halfway shoot match." Because I've only been to the gym 4 or 5 times. I didn't know how to work.
Right.
So I said, "I want you to shoot." And I didn't really know what that meant. But so we went out. We really kind of beat each other up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. After about 12 minutes, I was breathing. But Klondike Bill, the old pro, he was dying. He said, "Let's finish this damn thing." So we boom and bing, covered, and that was my first match.
Now, did the veterans, when you first broke in, kayfabe you a lot, or did they pretty much smarten you up?
They kayfabe me in this way. The first trip I made to Kalamazoo, Michigan, for the first match, I was in a car with 4 wrestlers. And one of them's an Indian. "What tribe are you from?" He said, "Me from Puerto Rican tribe." I mean, so,
Right.
they were working with kind of shooting with me. And when I went for that first match, we went to the old hotel in Detroit, which was the wrestling office on about the 5th floor. And I walked in, and there was 3 guys playing poker. Now, this was one of the promoters and 2 businessmen from the area. Big, serious poker.
Right.
There was guys sitting all around the room. A lot of them I hadn't met before. They were all wrestlers. No one said, hi, go to hell or whatever. They just sit there. And I walked in kind of uncomfortable. Finally, Gino Brito, the guy that was really breaking me up and breaking me into the business, walked over and said, "Oh, Jim," he's whispering, and "we'll be going in the cars here in a couple of minutes." And so I didn't really, what do I know?
How difficult was it back then? I mean, obviously to call a match, but the locker rooms, there was, back in the old days, there was heel locker room and face locker room, and nowadays, it's pretty much everyone's together. Was that difficult at all for you guys? Or?
Well, no, we were in the same locker room back then. They put a manager with me. God, I can't think of his name, and it's very important that I do. But he was only with me about maybe 3 months. And and this is one of my real experiences from wrestling. He come back to the ring after a match. Louis Papineau,
right,
37 years old, come back after a match going, and fell dead.
Wow.
I mean, he died. And Johnny Gates is one of the old-time wrestlers who got beat all the time. Said, "Drag him back to the ring. Maybe I could cover him and get a pin. Get him out there when he's still warm." So it's like, whoa, this is a pretty cool business.
Yeah.
And that's the guy was dead, and this guy is talking about take him back out, and let me get a pin. I'm going, whoa.
Time to get help.
That's the way it was.
Now, your first gimmick, was it a student gimmick, I believe?
Well, we better be careful with gimmicks.
Right. Well, your first character.
A gimmick is when I take someone out of my pants and hit them in the throat and knock their friggin' head off.
Right.
My character, if you want to talk about my character, totally different ball game. I never looked at it as a gimmick. I started wrestling as a student. When I talked to Bert Ruby the first time, I told him, that I was a school teacher and coach and so on.
Right.
And we didn't want to mix the two. And I'm sure the school didn't want to mix it. And so we put a mask on me. I went to the ring in a red cap and gown, and I wrestled as a student, which really fit because I was learning the business. The student, it kind of made sense. When Louis Papineau died, they brought in a great wrestling protege of mine, Gary Hart.
I was going to ask you about Gary.
One of the greatest managers in the business, as far as I'm concerned. He was much more than just a gimmick manager now. I'm sorry I use that word. But he just didn't go to the ring with most of the guys after our experience. With me, he was brought in to manage me. There was no business locks to us at all. After that, he knew enough to always have a lock and to always have leverage with whoever he's working with. And we learned that together from Bert Ruby. Every promoter I ever worked with, which was not a lot. I didn't go all over the world because I was able to get over in New York, but I didn't want to go anywhere else.
Right, exactly.
Come on, give me a break. But anyhow, we just, I learned how to maintain leverage, get leverage on the promoter. It's a game that you play. The big work is not always in the ring. Sometimes it's in the dressing room with the boys, intimidating. You know, you just you don't want to be challenged every time you're out there. So they got to respect your toughness. And then the promoter, he's the one that's going to pay you. So you got to play games with him and make him want you more than you want him, which I was able to do because I remained teaching. So it was a leverage that I always had.
Right.
I could turn around and go back to teach. I taught for 25 years.
Wow. I remember when you were with WWF, you would pretty much work in the summer and then
go back to school. It was a part-time wrestling,
right.
part-time job for me. That's all it ever was.
As far as doing the student character, how hard was that for you to play that character? And how far did that go? How long did you stay with that?
Well, I started with it. My first match, when I went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, I had the mask on. 6 weeks later, I was wrestling in the main events. It was just bam, right to the top. They needed somebody at the time. I had a mask on, and I had this outfit. After I take the cap and gown off, all the hair showed, and I had the top, and it was all red. And it was really a pretty charismatic thing. And then the look, and I knew nothing.
Right.
Gary used to yell at me, 2, and that meant something. It was like playing football. We had signals, and they were real signals. And then he ended up one night, we decided that we were going to have a whistle. He'd blow the whistle 2 times, 3 times. We were way ahead of our time, so then we were selling the whistles to the crowd.
Oh.
So they were going all, 2, 2, 2. And act like they're screwing me up, and we sold a lot of whistles.
When was the first time you met the original Sheik? What are your memories of?
First time I met the original Sheik, his very best friend, who had really helped me a lot learn the business, was Leapin' Larry Shane. Leapin' Larry Shane was coming back. He had I think it was 8 children. And he had always worked in the Detroit area for Bert Ruby. We had a great promotion right there locally, and that's where the Sheik started. Larry had gone to Minneapolis to work a couple of matches, was driving back, and was killed in an automobile accident. So we were at Larry's funeral when the Sheik come in, and he come in, dressed like the Sheik would.
Right.
I don't mean but very, very silk suit type thing, real tight glasses, and they were like brothers. They were very close. The thing that I always felt was bad about that incident was if Larry Shane hadn't died at that time and the Sheik came in as a promoter in Detroit, they would have been dynamic. And we've all made tons of money.
Right.
Because Larry was the type of guy that would make sure that other guys were getting paid properly too. But Larry died. The Sheik came in about 1.5 years later. That's when I really met him. And I learned a lot of my character from the Sheik. I look at the Sheik as one of the wildest, greatest heels in the history of the business. I look at George Steele as one of the wildest, greatest heels in the business. But a lot of things he did, the gimmick,
right,
hiding, put it in my mouth, and standing on all that I learned from the Sheik, watching him. He never wanted to use a gimmick in Detroit,
right,
because that was his deal. In fact, one time I come to New York and I was back in there for them, and he knew I was doing it in Detroit. He started looking at my bag. I said, "Get your hands off my bag." He said, "You got a foreign object." I said, "You put your hands in my bag, you'll be a foreign object." I'll take care of your business here, but you get out of my business right now.
Right.
And that was important because, again, it's laying that level of who you are,
right,
which you always had to do in the business in those days.
Who would you consider your mentor early on in your career?
Bert Ruby.
Okay.
Bert Ruby. Bert Ruby taught me a little, he didn't take me to the ring and teach me the wrestling part of it. He taught me the leverage of the business and how to work promoters, how to work the guys, how to work the business. And he told me I had no intention, first of all, of ever leaving the Detroit area. I was a part-time wrestler, school teacher. I was number school teacher, and I didn't want to leave my kids, my family, and all that, so it was very important to me. So when we got to that part of it, he said to me, he says, "You'll always, if you go out on the road, you'll always have a safe haven to come back to if things don't go right." What are you talking about? I ain't going nowheres. But that was really important in those days. I mean, if I had left, and I didn't leave the Detroit area till about 4 years later, and Bruno Sammartino came into Detroit to wrestle a Bulldog Brower.
I was going to ask you, that's my next question.
And I'm a little bit ahead of you.
That's good. That's good.
And Bulldog Brower and him had a match, and I was supposed to work that night with Mark Lewin. He was the main event. The Sheik was having some work done on his behind.
Right.
He had, what do you call him?
Tailbone?
No. When you have...
Hemorrhoid?
Yeah, hemorrhoids.
Right.
He had a hemorrhoid operation, and so he was going to work with him, and I was supposed to work a tag team with Mark Lewin and the announcer from Detroit. What's his name? You should know that. Lord Layton, Lord Langston Layton, and then me and Killer Cox. Well, Cox and Lewin were always guys that would pull deals anyhow. I got in the ring. Now I'm still working a return to come back with Lewin. I walk out, and all of a sudden, as Lewin walks by, Cox jumps off the apron, grabs the ring, and boom, and he gets blood, and that's your next main event. And I'm standing like, now I got screwed.
Right.
I got screwed big time that night. I did get my first main event in Detroit. But that same night is when the Sheik, when Bruno was there with the entourage from New York, and they spotted me working with somebody else, and we had a great match. And they come up to me afterwards and just asked me a few questions, end of story. And about 2.5 weeks later, Bruno Sammartino called me, which gave me chills because there's a real champion of the world, I thought, boy. And he said, I'd like you to come to Pittsburgh and work a program with you. And I said, okay. And we went in and we worked, he had just taken over as a promoter there.
Right.
And they had a pretty decent house, about half full. We worked I worked, I think, twice before I worked with him. And one was just a singles match with one of the guys. And then it was a tag team with me and Bill Miller against him and probably the Batman. It sounds funny now, but it was Tony Marino. And then we worked an angle out of that where it was Bruno and I in the main event. That was their first sellout. Well, then we had 3 of them in a row. Bam, bam, bam. It was time to go back and teach. And this was during the school year, by the way, but Detroit was a 30-minute flight. I could coach football, jump on a plane. It was easier than driving to Grand Rapids and do a thing. And so that was really great. When I left there, this is what made George Yandel Steele. This is really the key to my success. When I went there, after I got done with the program, I come back and the Sheik started telling me about how much Bruno was complaining about how heavy I was and how stiff I was. And I was stiff, but so was Bruno. I mean, he worked that way. So anyhow, he's telling me that he's really bad mouthing me and knocking me. And when I was in Pittsburgh, every show, Bruno would tell me how much he enjoyed working with me. He would show me the books and the actual house and what percentage I was getting paid, how much money I was getting paid. The only promoter that ever did that.
I was going to say that, yeah.
And I was getting paid very, very well. I mean, my biggest paycheck in Detroit was $75. So I was getting paid very, very well. I was making more money in that one match than I make, in 2 matches for my whole school year.
Wow. So
it was pretty huge. So anyhow, I was telling him, boy, I'm really happy with the payoffs.
Right.
Not too happy because I would have more. And then the Sheik started telling me how he was complaining. And then they started getting words back to Bruno that I was complaining about the payoffs. And that's how you split people apart.
Right.
So he called me up about 6 months later, and Bruno's a hardhead. So is George. And he called me up, started telling me that they need somebody in New York. Vince McMahon needs somebody to come into New York, and I've recommended you, but you're a real jerk. We got to get this straightened out. And meanwhile, I'm yelling at him. You're a jerk. And we're going back and forth. Finally, he said, shut up and listen a minute. I showed you the books. I showed you the payoffs, and you were happy with them. How come you knocked my payoffs? I said, I never did. But you told me you enjoyed my matches. You enjoyed working with me. How come you were knocking my matches all over the country to these people? He said, I didn't do that. So what did it do? It bonded us. I mean, it made us really partners in a business situation.
Right.
And so then he kind of guided things for me going into New York and Pittsburgh, and we became very, very close. We fought like heck in the ring. And people say, and it's kids today think that because the business is a work, that it's easy. It's not easy. I mean, if you're working them, we got blood the hard way often. We did things tough, and they still do that in some places.
Right.
And I don't believe in throwing light bulbs down, taking bumps on it and tacks and all that crap. No. I'm talking about working the crowd, and you never get today. And Vince's show, and Vince should know better, but Vince was like a kid. And most of my respect in business came from his dad, Mr. McMahon Senior, and that's who I dealt with personally, and it was really a close bond. When the kid came on the scene, it was not that I disrespect him, I don't, but it was not the same level, and he's caught up in a situation. I'm getting way ahead of myself, so we back off of that. But kids today don't have the opportunity to go and learn to work. They're great athletes. They just don't know how to work it.
It's all spot, and
Yeah.
psychology.
And talk. When you're talking, if I'm in the ring and I yell down to you, "You're a big fat lady," or whatever I want to call you,
Right.
that's not heat. That's just a debate. It's not even cheap. It's just garbage. I've got to go through my opponent, and he's got to sell it to you. Now I get heat. Like, I make you want to ride. I make you want to burn the arena down.
Right.
But if I'm just hollering at you, you hollering back at me. I mean, yeah, that's nothing.
Who came up with the name George Steele?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh?
And we were in Pittsburgh, and I didn't want to use my real name, Jim Myers, and so we're going back and forth, and everybody'd like to get another name. And Johnny DeFazio was in the locker room. Johnny DeFazio later on became president of the Steelworkers Union, and he's from Pittsburgh. And he said, "Well, this is a Steel City. Why don't we call him Jim Steele?" I said, "I like Steele. I don't like Jim." And somebody else said, "George." I said, "That's it." So the good news is this side of my body's about 40 years old. This other side's about 70 years old. I prefer the George Steele side at times. But when I'm around people that, I'm Jim Myers, I can ride at 70.
Memories of Bill Miller.
Oh, man. What a great guy. You want a real memory from Bill Miller? We were at the Sheik's house, and we were going to, which was in Lansing. We met there for a little business stuff and so on. About 6 wrestlers and their families. We're going down to Cobo Arena for a big show. And the wives were going in and getting ready, and my kids had come in. I had all 3 of my children with me. And my youngest one, who's now 50, was 4 or 5 years old. And as we went in, he snuck out and went down by the pool, which was quite away from the place. And Bill Miller's wife had just had her hair done and was getting ready to go to the show. My son was reaching for a ball in the pool and fell in. And if she wouldn't have been there, he'd have died. She dove in with her hair and the whole thing and saved my son's life. That was our beginning.
Right.
That was our beginning. Wow. From then, I thought Bill Miller was one of the toughest, best, most loyal people I ever met in the business. I loved him to pieces. Later on, when I was an agent, and he came to Columbus, Ohio, to a show. He was on walkers, could hardly walk. But we were bonded so tight. And I saw him, I had tears in my eyes. He had tears in his eyes. I hadn't seen him in about 8 years. That's the nature of the wrestling business. But what a gentleman, what a stud, what a tough guy.
Were you the animal yet at this point in time?
The animal, I guess I was always the animal. No one ever sit down. We didn't have these creative meetings like they have now. People started calling the crowd because I do the things that I do and the look, and they started calling me an animal. You're an animal, you're an animal. So I get them, I'm not an animal, I'm a people. And after a while, I kept doing that. I go on TV, quit calling me an animal. And the fans are the ones that named me the animal. When I first went to New York, how stupid was this? They had me George the Bruiser Steele. That was my name going in. And I told them, I don't like that, just George Steele. Right. And then later on, the fans picked up on it. I became an animal.
At what point in your career did you gain more confidence in yourself as a worker or a wrestler?
I was full of confidence by the time I left Detroit. When I was done being the student, I was prepared. I've been around some of the best workers, in my opinion, in the business. Old timers that were just working one old territory, and they were just fantastic. And they taught me all angles of the business. I mean, I was ready. I was really lucky that I didn't have to quit teaching. Mr. McMahon offered me an opportunity to go with, what's his name? He looks a lot like me. He was bald-headed. He was a wild guy, too, and he wanted to make us the wildest tag team. We were going to travel with Andre the Giant. He wanted me to quit teaching for a lot of money, but my loyalty was to my family and to my coaching and teaching, not to wrestling. And I know that sounds terrible, but wrestling was very good to me. Don't take that wrong.
Right.
But it was very, very good. But my first love was not wrestling. Never has been.
How did the turnbuckle leading start? When was the first time you started doing that?
Pittsburgh. I mean, everything started in Pittsburgh. We used to have a studio wrestling. They got about maybe 80 people in the studio, and they had plywood around behind them, and it was black and white TV, by the way.
Right.
So they had faces painted white faces painted on the plywood to make it look like a bigger crowd.
Right.
And then they would give away gifts, sometimes ashtrays, sometimes not hard ashtrays. I would hope. But this one time they give away before your time. But they used to have satin pillows, couch pillows, real tight packed little satin things. I don't know if you've ever seen them or not. No. Some old lady got one. They give away 80 of them. So this old lady, ringside Rosie, who was not part of the show but was there always,
right,
threw her pillow at me. Now I got a pillow in the ring. What am I going to do with a pillow in the ring? I mean, it's a tool. Everything's a tool to me, to use. Not a gimmick, a tool. It's the only gimmick I got. But I'm looking at it, and I know if I sit on it, it's going to be a slow match. If I take it and throw it at her, they're going to throw 80 of them back at me. I mean, I'm running out of options. I'm not real smart, but I thought, well, so I bid it. And this thing exploded because it was packed so tight. It started going up in the air. So I started throwing it in the air. It's coming down like snow. It wasn't flying down.
Right.
Real light, lighter than air, sticking in my hair like the abominable snowman. So now, I'm really getting into that.
Right.
And then I take my pillow and I stick it over my opponent's head. And I'm choking him. Great TV, man. I'm working that Cameron boy, and he's selling. And I take it off, he's blue. Because the stuffing is lighter than air. So every time he breathes in,
wow.
I'm filling his lungs with stuffing. I almost killed him. So I go to the dressing room, and the guys being like they are, they all laughing. Oh, you almost killed that one. And one of the guys said, if you get somebody to throw a pillow at you every night, you could really be something. And what's his name? Puglisi. Tony Puglisi says, yeah, maybe you could eat a turnbuckle. And we all laughed. About 2.5 weeks later, I was working with Jay Strongbow, Chief Jay Strongbow.
Okay.
And the match just sucked. And the people are sitting on their hands. And usually I got a reaction. They weren't reacting at all. So I looked at the turnbuckle. I thought, I wonder. It popped. It was over Everlast mat, and it popped open. Pulled the stuff out, threw that out, rubbed it in his eye. Almost had a riot.
Wow.
And I learned right then that I could do better with turnbuckles than I can wrestling. So turnbuckles happen in almost every match. And the next thing you're going to ask me is about the green tongue.
Well, I would ask you about that coming up, but we could go into that right now.
Okay, the green tongue happened in guess where?
Pittsburgh?
Oh, you're getting smart.
There you
you're
go.
Getting with it, brother. I'd had a few drinks, and I were getting ready for TV, and I didn't want them to know it. Bruno was gone. We had a new promoter in, and so I put some chlorets in my mouth. It went on live TV, and now we have got color TV.
Right.
So the switchboard lit up. Why is this? I didn't know my tongue was green, and it lit up, and they blew over. That was on a Saturday. The following Friday, I wrestled in Civic Arena, and there was green tongues hanging all over the place. I thought, God, that's funny.
That got over.
But I never did it again for another 5 or 6 months. Wasn't that smart yet. And I thought, that green tongue thing really got over. I'm going to do that again, see how they react. So I ate some chlorets, this time on purpose. Went out, TV went crazy. Live TV again in Pittsburgh. Went to the arena, they had green tongues all over the place. From that time on, I'm guaranteeing you, the best breath in wrestling. I had chlorets every time I wrestled.
Now, Pittsburgh, was that like an outlaw promotion since Bruno was blackballed a little bit?
No.
Okay.
No. Bruno wasn't blackballed at that time. Bruno was working. He was a WWF champion.
Okay.
And he was running the territory. They'd give him that part of it to run. He was the owner of it. And then he would come in and do his shows in New York and so on and run his little operation over here.
Right.
And he would have the opportunity to bring in the top guys he was using in Madison Square Gardens in his own show in Pittsburgh. So it was pretty good business setup.
When you taught and coached, did any of the students recognize you at the school as being a wrestler early on?
I had some kids, but one kid actually lived in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. They brought in magazines at different times. I'm going to cover the whole thing. It's a great question, and things did happen. They come and say, "You're George the Animal Steele." I look at him and say, "No, but do you really think I'm that ugly?" And what's he going to think? There's a student. No, you're not that ugly. And my name is Jim Myers, and I'm a football coach here. No, I'm not George the Animal Steele. And at first it was just George Steele. No, I'm not George Steele. They bring the magazines in. And it was like working each other. They sit in the back, my health class, they sit in the back. I'd catch them with it. They'd try to hide it. What's that? That's you in the magazine. Let me see that. Do you think I'm that ugly? And they'd always play it off that way, and they'd end up working with me because they had to say no.
Right.
Or, what are we going to
They
do?
get an F.
Yes.
That's great. I guess, how did you wind up in the WWWF working for Vince Sr.?
Well, I told you about Bruno making that phone call.
Right.
And they wanted me there, so I got a phone call from, after I agreed, then I got another phone call from, this is crazy, from Bruno, and I had to go to the old hotel in Washington, D.C. for TV. Trying to, as they get older, a lot of this goes away.
That's like
The Franklin Hotel. And, but they told me to take a cab, no one's going to meet me at the airport. You fly in, get on a cab, come to the Franklin Park Hotel, and go up to go to the old rickety elevator and go up to the 4th floor, go in. They wanted me to go in, not say anything to anybody about me being anybody, no check in or nothing. Just go to the door, knock on the door, and I did. And this little old man answered the door. He was in his shorts and one of those muscle-like T-shirts. Not really a muscle, just an old cut-off shirt. And it was Phil Zacco. Phil says, "Oh, George, we've been waiting for you." He walks me down in his shorts in the hall to the room where Bruno and Vince was waiting for me. It was all kayfabe. Bruno came in the night before. No one saw me come in the same time. They didn't know who I was, and we're kayfabing. Come on. But we go in and we sit down and we started talking. And I had a sport coat on with the leathers. You know, I looked like a school teacher, not a wrestler.
Right.
And Vince Sr. says a couple of things. He says to Bruno, "Are you sure?" Bruno says, "Yeah, sure. We sold out 4 times. You know, you need to take a better look." Right now, Vince was this guy. You know, what's this crap?
Right.
A lot of them come with flamboyant colors and all that. Just an old gray-looking guy. And he said, "Would you take your shirt off?"
Huh.
So I had a tie on. I had a shirt. "Would you take your stuff off?" So I'm going, "Oh, here we go again." As soon as he sees the hair, yes. And he saw the thickness. Boom. My first show in Madison Square Garden. Very first one. I don't know of anyone else that ever did this. I did TV. The first time I wrestled in Madison Square Garden was against Bruno Sammartino for the WWF Championship, WWWF Championship, and we won an hour through. First time I won an hour through in my match, and they said, "We want you to go an hour." I didn't say, "No, I can't do it," because that would not be very good leverage.
Right.
And it was a great match. I mean, I was so tired at the end, but they didn't know it. And I just pushed myself like I was in a football training camp. I mean, we worked hard that night. But my first match was an hour and we had a return.
Wow.
No one else, I mean, first match in Madison Square Gardens. I'm not talking about having a build-up match. I'm talking about the first match, Bruno Sammartino. The second match, a return match. Pretty powerful stuff.
How'd the second one go?
Powerful, great. They're both sold out. See, the other thing, I had been there, but I've been on TV for only, at that time, 9 weeks. And when I walked out, the place went nuts.
Huh.
They just went nuts because
Right.
I was pretty vicious. And I never worked a real good match at TV. I just really chopped meat.
Right.
If I was wrestling you might be able to breathe, but that would be about it.
Right.
It was all mine. So they were really anxious to see if Bruno could beat me or not.
Memories of working with Jay Strongbow.
Jay was a great worker. The laziest worker I ever worked with. I mean, he didn't want you to hit him that hard. I mean, I'm stiff.
Right.
And he's like, "Whoa, if you hit me hard again, I'm leaving." And we worked one night, probably the best match we had. I was working with Pedro Morales in Boston the following night in Boston Gardens. Very weak advance. And the Globe had come there to cover my match with the Chief. The promoter at the time was Abe Ford, and he was really, trying to bump the match because it was really weak. And they wanted me to go out and have about a 10-minute match and beat Jay so my hand would go up so I'd be all right in the Boston Gardens. And the guy running the agent at that time was not Arnold Skoll and the other one, Angelo Savoldi. And he says, "We want you to go about 10 minutes, we'll beat him, get your hand up." I said, "How's that going to sell tickets? They've got a bad advance. I'm not doing that." He said, "That's what Vince wants." I said, "I really don't care what Vince wants. We're talking about leverage now.
Right.
This is what we're going to do. I'm going to go out. Chief is going to be in the far corner, doing his little dance when I come out." I said, "I'm going to act like I'm going to attack him. And then he's going to turn his back right back on me. And as I attacked him, he's going to clothesline me and put me in the sleeper hold. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to fight this sleeper hold. I'm going to fight it. And I'm going to go to sleep. And you're going to raise his hand." He said, "I can't do that. You'll kill everything." I said, "You're going to raise his hand. And the Chief is going to start dancing with excitement. And when he does, he's going to look back at me. And I'll be laying there like I'm dead. When he starts dancing again, the fans will see me start to crawl behind him. They'll know I'm playing possum. And then I get chills when I talk about this. This is great.
All right.
And then he, so when I did that, the fans went, "Whoa!" And he stopped and looked at a small arena. It was in North Attleboro. And I'm laying still again. He starts dancing again. When he turns this time, I got the foreign object out and I beat him like a red-headed stiff child. He's got blood all over him.
Nice.
I left him in the floor bleeding. And the photographer from the newspaper had it there, and the article was the headlines on the sports page, second page, that George Steele lost, but it doesn't pay to beat him. And they had this picture, and they're dead. And then we sold out the Boston Gardens on the write-up because those. And then we come back to the little arena, and it was packed out too. So that was one of the good matches. Then we did nothing.
Did you like working that territory early on?
Oh yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you?
Exactly. Who did you travel with back then?
Back then, things were a lot different. I traveled with Tanaka very often. Charlie was a little bit of a wacko, but he was a good guy. Later on, with drugs and so on becoming the business, I traveled by myself.
Right.
Because I was a school teacher and coach. I just couldn't afford to take a chance of getting busted with somebody having something even in their bag and being guilty by association. Screw it.
When you went to the WWF the first time, did it come out to the media that you were a teacher part-time at all?
No. We covered that pretty well, except I was doing an interview I did a lot of magazine here the first couple of years.
Right.
I was doing one in Portland, Maine. And after the interview, the promoter was really excited that I'd played football at Michigan State and that I was, a coach. And he slipped it out, and it went there, and it just spread like this here. And no one else ever mentioned it. So that one magazine. But it was great because when you put something in people's mind, they hear things word of mouth. It makes them wonder about you.
Right.
And so now the wilder and crazier I got, some people say, yeah, but I heard he's a school teacher. So it really built into the whole image of George Steele, which was really is the business is a work. So the more different things you have going on in people's minds about you, the better off it is.
What about Gorilla Monsoon? Some of your memories working with Gorilla?
I only worked with Gorilla a few times, really. He was a heel, I was a heel. Later on, he turned, after we become part of the partnership in the WWF, he became a bit of a babyface. I think I worked with him 3 times. I traveled with him a lot.
Right.
To actually get in the ring with him. He was a good athlete. He was a big old, looked like a tub slob type thing, but he wasn't. He was a stud athlete.
He could go.
Oh, yeah.
What about Pedro?
Pedro was a good guy. I had a match with Pedro, the funniest match I ever had. It was a spot show up in northern New York. It might have been farther north than that. It might have been out of state. But it was a spot show. And I got a referee that's just, doesn't really get it. And Pedro's left-handed. And we start the match and boom, 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 I put a wrist lock on him. I used to use holes. Maybe this is why I quit using holes. But I put a wrist lock on him. And he's standing there. I says, hit me. He says, I can't. You got my left hand. I said, hit me. Lay it in. He said, I can't. You got my left hand. I said, ring my bell. The referee turned around. Ding, ding, ding. And they rang the bell. Well, Skolin was running the show, and Skolin had already left. He called Vince Sr. and told him we had a great match and things were over. He left early. He didn't know. And then the promotion called up. They wanted their money back because the main event had gone less than a minute. And so I said, well, the stupid referee rang the bell. He said, well, why didn't you just keep fighting with him? I said, they kept ringing the bell. I did. I said, finally, I just figured, screw it, and I left.
That's great.
He said, well, you got me in trouble with Vince. I said, well, you should have stuck around.
Wow. Now, you went down for a brief period of time. You worked Georgia just for a couple of shots down there. What were your thoughts on Ole Anderson?
Now you're getting some meat.
Yeah.
Politics. See, this is when the NWA was starting to spread out off of their TV, and they had come to Detroit. And Dusty Rhodes had come to Detroit with Gary Hart, my old manager, and a guy by the name of Steve Herms, which was did a lot of promotions and TV stuff for them out west. And they stopped by my house because they hadn't seen Gary in a long time. We were just going to make a trip with them. I'm not on the card.
Right.
Because they're in teaching time. I'm not wrestling anywhere. And we're riding down. We stopped at the old Sheik's house, and it was kind of a mess. I mean, things were tough at that time for him. And but we talked a lot. So Dusty said, I'd like to bring you into the NWA, and me and you work a tag team against these guys. We'll really get you over. And so I said, okay. I was going to go in. And the gimmick was a great gimmick. And this was a gimmick, not a character. They put me in a cage, and they put a cloth around the cage, and I was shaking every now and then. But people, they got a wild man in there. And finally, Dusty comes over and opens it up. First of all, when I was doing it, it's kind of I knocked it off once. Be back up in the cage. But Dusty comes over to open the door. I come out, we just kill something. Boom, 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 boom. And we're going to wrestle. I think it was
Piper and I think Ole, right?
I think it was Ole. And who was the other one?
Roddy Piper.
No, I don't think it was Piper. I don't think it was. I don't think it was quite in the picture yet, but it might have been.
Okay.
I mean, I was so it didn't matter to me.
Right.
Because what happened was, We did the bing, 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 bing. I went back home. It's just TV now.
Right.
And so we're building up for a show in the Omni. And the next, and so I wasn't supposed to go back to the next week's TV show because Dusty couldn't be there and we were partners. And they were playing this here Who's Boss game and they was using me as a tool.
Wow.
Big mistake because I'm not a tool for both of them.
Right.
Get it. So I come back in. I go home. I must go back in. I get a phone call. We need you to come back in for the TV this time. So I go back in and Dusty's not there. And they've got this kid, I can't think of his name. This is just a real quick thing. The blonde-headed guy that was such a big name for me.
Tommy Rich?
Tommy Rich. They got him speaking for me now. And they're kind of tagging us and kind of pushing Dusty out. But Dusty's going to be my partner, but he's going to talk for you. So they're really cutting into what we were doing.
Right.
And I knew that right away. And this is shady. And I don't do shady. So I come in for the Omni show. It's sold out. They haven't had a good show in a long time. This place is packed out. And we're in the back room, and they said, "Now we want you. When you come out, we just want you to hit Holy. If it was Piper or whoever, they're going to fly, and you just boom, and we're going to do this and this and this and this." I'm thinking, yeah, okay, you want to play a game with me, wrong guy to play with. So I go out, and as soon as I hit the ring, Holy doubles up. Oh, back! I sell it. I killed it, dead, and never went back. It was a one-show deal, and that's why it was a one-show deal. If they'd have been straight with me, I'd have been straight with them. But you're going to play games using me. I had New York. What do I need Atlanta for? Come on, give me a break.
It was like the minor leagues.
No, absolutely.
What were your thoughts on Ole as a person?
I wasn't around him that much. You know, it was just that those three, you know, the two TVs in the house show. I thought he was a big bag of wind, but kind of, I don't know if he could back it up or not.
Right.
We never got to a point where we found that out. But he ran a pretty tight ship, I thought. I was impressed by him somewhat. He said one thing later on in a book that he read that really is true. He was talking about the marks and the smart marks and the historians, and I'm very strong in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. I mean, that's my love, and I was one of the founders of it, and it's the real deal. But a lot of the guys that are on the committees to vote into the Hall of Fame don't really get it because the guy wrestled in every territory in the country. When we were doing territories in Japan and so on and so forth, does not make him a great worker. A great worker is a guy like Ole or some of these guys, Larry Shane, that could go into one territory and make top money for 30 years and never have to leave. You understand what I'm saying? If you got to leave, that means you're not getting over there anymore. You got to go find somewhere else.
Right.
So I always had a problem with that part of the business. A lot of people don't understand it. I mean, personally, I went into New York for a lot of years, only in the summertime. I made a fortune in New York. Why would I want to go to anywhere else? And if I could do that, most guys can't do that. I'm not really egotistic, but I put myself over now. The reason that I was able to do it is I wrestled the champion. It could be Bruno, it could be Pedro, it could be Bobby, or even I'm the only guy that worked with all and Hulk. Worked with all four of them over that period of time, and that's a long period of time. But the gift was I had leverage because I would go 2 or 3 months and have all main events. There's another whole story to that, too, about money now.
Right.
I have all main events, then I go back and teach. Why is that so good? They only saw me lose to the champions. And so I never, the other guys that came in, let's just talk with Bruno because he's number one, really. They'd come and work a program with Bruno in the Gardens. Then they would work at the next program, let's say in Boston, and they would get beat in the Gardens by whoever, by the Babyface.
Right. Then
they would work Philadelphia. They make one, 2 or 3 shows. It didn't matter. And they work Philadelphia. So now they get beat in New York and Boston, and they're looking good in Philadelphia. Then they get beat by Bruno there, and they go in, and they work their way around the horn. They're there for 9-10 months, and they've been beat by Bruno all over the place and everybody else because when they're done in Boston, they're still on the card, and Vince had to pay them. I learned a lot of my business and psychological working with the promoters sitting on the toilet. The first time it was the 2 toilet stories. I'm in Detroit. And I hear Bert Ruby talking to Louis Klein and Larry Shane. Don't go to sleep over there. Jesus. I'm talking. I look over, the guy sleeping on the bed.
I'm not sleeping.
I can't believe that. Anyhow, I'm sitting on the toilet and they start talking about me. So my feet come up. Right. I don't see, And Larry Shane and Lou Klein are complaining about their payoff. And Bert says, well, what are you talking about? I'm giving you some of the students. I'm the main event. I'm giving you some of the students' money. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. I had no idea how much money. Still haven't made $75. My best payoff was $90. It's $75 earlier. So it was 90. Still haven't made 90 yet. And I hear that. So the next day, now I'm all the way home and I'm not sleeping good that night. I'm hot. So I come back the next day and I said to Bert, I said, why are you taking some of my money and giving it to Lou and Larry? He said, because they work full time and you're part time. You got another job. You don't depend on wrestling. So wait a minute. If the school decided to pay me half because I'm wrestling, and you're paying me half because I'm teaching, I'd be working 2 jobs for 1 payoff. And it doesn't add up. He said, you got a choice. You can leave. I'm making $75 a night. I was looking for a job as a bouncer for $15 a night. That was huge in the 60s. Are you kidding me?
Right.
I ain't walking away. And then a little bit later, he wanted me to work a program with his son, Alan. He was an announcer. And I refused to do that, so I didn't work for 4 weeks. And this is what I'm telling you is very important in how I learned the business. So I go back in, and I said, he called me up and says, are you ready to go to work? I said, yeah. So I go in. I said, how come you didn't book me? He said, because you refused to do something that I wanted you to do, and you have no leverage. Always make sure you have leverage before you make any decisions in wrestling. Whoa, lights go on. Now I'm on the toilet in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. walks in. They don't see me, but I see their feet at the latrine.
Right.
They're doing their whiz thing. My feet go up because they're talking about me. And Vince Jr. is saying, why do we bring George in all the time and take such good care of him financially and everything?
Right.
Vince Sr. says, because it's a good deal. How's that? He says, we bring him in for 3 months. We sell out all over the Northeast. He leaves. We don't have to keep paying him in New York because the other guys, when they're getting beat, and they're still paying him top money.
Right.
So they're making a lot of money. He says, we don't have to pay him that money all the way through while he's going around. We can pay him big time for 3 months and he's out of here. We don't have to worry about him until next year. And he comes in, we can do it all over again. We've been doing it, at that time, it's like 7 years. He said, why would we quit? Well, anyway, he's the best deal we've got going. Leverage.
Right.
Bingo.
Wow. What are your memories?
Always keep your feet up in the toilet.
Yeah, it's a good lesson. What are some of your memories working with Andre the Giant?
I only worked with Andre 3 times. One time we was working up in New Hampshire, and I gave him a nut shot, and he chased me around the ring.
Huh.
And I rolled in the ring at 9. He got counted out. He was pissed.
Right.
It was hot. And the other time I wrestled with him was in Buffalo, New York, at the old Armory before they had Pepsi Arena. And Andre was drinking wine that night and eating garlics. And I'm not talking a little guy. He was eating the whole thing. Good. And I was in a different locker room that particular night. And you guys watch. I have fun with George. So we go in the ring. He grabs me, puts me in a corner, takes those hands, are like slobbering garlic and wine all over my face. And the smell was horrible. I got his thumb and I jerked on it and got away from him.
Right.
He goes, ha, ha, ha. He come across the ring, caught me again, jammed me in, give me the garlic treatment again. I caught his thumb again, got away from him, rolled out of the ring and went and left.
That was it.
That was enough of Andre.
Around 77, you went back to WWF, and I think Superstar Billy Graham was on top now.
Yeah.
How different was that around that?
It was a real good thing, really. When they decided to do that, first of all, one of the first times I was really swerved by the promotion. Billy had told some fans and news magazine people to show up in Baltimore because he's going to win the title. I'm in the territory at the time.
Right.
And so they call Captain Lou Albano was managing me, and Captain Lou driving nuts talking.
Right.
So he's talking to me, and he says, they're going to give you the belt. I said, what? He said, they're going to put the belt on you. I said, I'm going back to school. I don't need no belt. And he said, no, that's to talk. They had buzzed Lou because they knew he'd talk to everybody. Right. And that word would get out, so make it a little, maybe George is getting it, so it'd be a little bit of a thing, which wasn't really going to happen at all. And because I called Bruno when I got home after that trip, I said, Bruno, what's this about? He said, no. He said, they're just feeding Lou to get the crap out there. Billy's going to, grab it from me over there.
What?
So what they had at that time, Billy, when he first came on, wasn't what they wanted quite. Billy was the greatest heel champion I think WWE's ever had. That's what I'm saying. But it just didn't hook on right at first. because it was Bruno. I mean, you beat Bruno. I mean, God Almighty, you beat Jesus Christ Himself. It seemed like how some people thought, and so it wasn't. But we had Ken Patera,
right,
and George Steele was in there at the time, and we had a lot of heat on us, both of us. So we had like 3 main events. The money went to the champion, which was Billy, but the other 2 carried heavyweight. We were talking. All 3 of us working heavyweight matches, and that's when the WWF started going from 1 main event to stronger cards to support it. That's when that started, because it used to be, if you were working with Bruno, with the guy leaving, the guy coming in, and the rest of it was just locals.
Huh.
So that's when that started, to support Billy. But that's not a put down to Billy. Billy should have been champion for 5 or 6 years, as far as I'm concerned. They should have switched him to a babyface a year and a half, 2 years out. The reason that they didn't is Vince McMahon Sr., Mr. McMahon's biggest fear was always a riot. And with a heel, I mean, that's why they wrestled and put the belt on Billy in Baltimore, because Baltimore wasn't doing great business at the time.
Right.
And the chances of a riot was a lot less than in New York.
Speaking of Albano, what are your memories of Captain Lou? And do you remember him always getting fired at TVs?
Fired at TV. I remember tipping Mr. McMahon's desk over, calling him an Irish this and an Irish that, and a little vodka talking. He was beautiful. I first ran into him when I was in Pittsburgh. Him and Tony Altomare kind of took me under the wing. My first memory of the 2 of them, Northeast. When I come in here now, and I'm a hayseed.
Right.
Coming in New York and Boston, Philadelphia, Northeast, first summer. Every time we went anywheres, I rode with both of them. They had cars, I didn't. And I didn't rent a car, I just rode with them. And we stopped to eat lunch every day. They would grab my tab. It's on us, you're every day. And I kept telling them, no, I'll pay my own way. Oh, you can buy the gas. But every day they bought me lunch the whole summer. When it's getting ready to leave, they brought a paper bag in, had all the bills that I had walked out on, and they hadn't paid.
Right.
To give me a great rib. That's the best. Great rib. But that's how I remember them too.
What about Ivan Putski? What are your memories of working with Ivan?
Ivan had a great look. We weren't on the same page often.
Right.
He had the Polish hammer. But I remember working with him. The outstanding memory I have on him, I could have broke his friggin' neck, was in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I'm on the apron, and I'm selling, and he's really laying him in on me. I'm selling. I look up, and I'm still laying in on me, but he's sitting on the far corner, on top of the turnbuckle, laughing like heck. And there's a little old lady with an umbrella just beating me to death. Huh. And I'm selling it because I think it's him. I'm not looking, I'm selling it. And she's hit me so hard it's bringing blood out. Oh. And I'm thinking, God, we take care of each other, don't we, in this business? But that's my biggest memory.
What about Stan Stasiak?
I wasn't around Stan that much. He was there more in the wintertime when he won the belt. I was there right afterwards. He was a great guy, just a real great guy, ribs and stuff like that, a lot of fun. Just a real solid, great guy.
How different was it also when you went back and you worked with Backlund? Or he was on top, I believe, the next year, right? I
ran into Backlund in Japan before he was ever a champion. He was a skinny-looking runt kid. And he wanted me to take this picture back to Mr. McMahon to give to him. And I'm looking at it, God, can I give him? Because he looked like a young Howdy Doody.
Right.
I really had trouble. But it was a great kid. And I ran with him. We did the alleys and everything in Japan. And I told Vince about him, laughing about it. Here's a kid that wants to come to New York. Next summer when I came in, the following summer after Japan, Bobby was there. And they asked me to put him over to get him ready to be champion. Bobby had a suit that his wife had made up. Bobby's pretty frugal, great guy. And he had the suit that his wife had made. And Vince Sr. wanted me to tear it off of him, which I did. And he started to make a comeback. And then I was leaving. That was my last TV show, and I was going back to teach. I said, I'll do that if you guarantee me a few shots with him next summer. He said, I'll guarantee you 3. Wow. So bing, leverage.
Right.
Bing, I did the thing, did it right. He ran me off. Come back, and we ran a great program. I thought Bobby was right there with the greatest champion of all time. Now, people are going to laugh when I say that because people mimicked him. They called him Howdy Doody. They really wanted the heels to beat him. But that's the gimmick. He sold out. He sold out all the time. And without that charge that Bruno had. Totally different. Bruno was the greatest champion of all time. What could Bruno have been if he wasn't champion? Think about that. just another Italian wrestler. And that's not a knock because there's some great ones, but he wouldn't have been what he was. Bobby also had to have the belt. These two guys had to be champions or they wouldn't draw you a dime.
Billy Graham says Bob was, when we did an interview with him, he said that Bob was always paranoid. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. At first, he gained. I wrestled Bobby probably more than anybody, and he gained a lot of confidence with me. He knew that I was out there to take care of him and make him look good. One summer, Vince Senior, Mr. McMahon came in and said, "George," he says, "I know you're going back to school. I need to get this kid over. He'd been champion maybe 3 years. He had 2 years." He says, "I want him to beat you in about 20 seconds." I said, "What?" He said, "I want you to get beat in about 20 seconds." I said, "Vince, I'll do it, but that's stupid." I said, "Because it ain't going to get him over. I can get him over, but not in 20 seconds. And it's going to kill me off." I said, "Is that what you want to do?" He said, "Well, let's talk about it. What do you want to do?" And then the following year, we worked our program, and it was the end of the program, and I was going back to teach. And the year before was one shot with Bobby and the guards. I had 2 or 3 of them in Boston and every place else. There was one in the guard.
Right.
That's why I said no. This other one, I had 2 shots with him. I think it was 2. And the second shot, he said, "I'd like you to put him over in about 20 seconds. I said, "Good." He said, "Why are you doing it now and you wouldn't do it then?" I said, "Because it makes more sense right now. We can do it." I said, "I can do it in a way where it'll keep him good, make him great, and it ain't going to hurt me." He said, "How are you going to do that?" I said, "Watch. You didn't buy a ticket, so you get a free seat." And we went out and I did the boom, 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 boom. What people don't realize, I worked a lot of returns with Bruno. Often it was the same return both nights. Come back the third night, do the same finish. I mean, I did the same thing a lot of times with him. And it wasn't, we never talked anything but the finish.
Right.
But we did it in such a way that it left it hot. You don't sell tickets during the match. You sell tickets after the match. And that's where I was a master of selling tickets after it was over with. I'd struggle through a match, but when it was over with, the people were ready to buy more tickets to see what's going to happen in stage 2.
What was the finish for the match with the Bob with that one, 20 seconds?
Bob, I smacked him. I ran his head into the turnbuckle, which I did a million times. He
Right.
pushed me off. I come back. I'd used the gimmick on him only once. I ran him in. He pushed me off. I come back. He covered me 1, 2, 3. I got up. I sold it.
Right.
But sold it like I was selling possum again, like with the chief. And he's raising his hand, raising his belt. I attacked him. Left him laying and left.
Awesome. In 81, it seemed that you wrestled all year. Did you take a sabbatical at the time?
What year?
Around 81?
No.
Okay.
No. I flew in and out a lot, but I was coaching football at the time, and we had a great, and I coached wrestling until 82. So I was coaching football and wrestling. So I was going to work in the fall and the winter. I'd fly in for just special shots. Is that when Bobby was champion?
I believe so, yeah.
I was just, they needed somebody. They went through periods of time when they had heels that would come in and not get over.
Right.
That might, you know what? That might have been, no, it wasn't. I got called one time. Blackjack Mulligan was a heck of a guy. He's a tough guy. Was wrestling a program with Andre the Giant. But every night he was asking for more money. So Vince called me up, and that was one summer I didn't come in. I was working for the Bearman in Canada. And they called me up. They want me to come in and replace Blackjack Mulligan. And this is main events with Bobby would be on the belt, on the title, on the match.
Right.
Main event, I would be right underneath him with Andre getting the same money. And Vince wanted me to come in. I said, "Let me think that over, Vince." Leveraging it.
All right.
So I called him back the next day and I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Why not? You're working with the Bearman. You're not making any money." I said, "Well, we've got 3 problems." He said, "What's that?" I said, "Number 1, if I come in because I'm a part-time wrestler and undercut a guy's pay, I become what you call a scab. And I'm not a scab. And I would lose respect for all the guys in the business who respect me very highly. Number 2, if I did that, I'm going to end up fighting with Blackjack Mulligan." I said, "Now, I'm not afraid of that. It'd be a heck of a fight. But what's the point? I mean, I would agree with him. He should be hot. We're going to have a physical deal over it. For what? For a few bucks. Number 3, are you sure you want to do it?" Let me think about it. He called me up the next day. He said, "Well, I told you got to pay me the same money."
Right.
He's asking for it every night. You got to pay me that way. Now, if you're paying me the money, I'm not a scab. So then
That's good.
He said, "Let me call you back the next day." So he called me back the next day. So I thought it over. If I got to pay him the same money I'm going to pay him, I might as well keep him. I said, "Good decision."
What are your memories of the Grand Wizard and guys like Freddie Blassie?
Grand Wizard, was the Sheik's manager in Detroit when I was there. Before I ever came to New York or Pittsburgh, when I was a student. And he was just a great guy. So when he came in here, we bonded naturally. He was my first manager in here. First 2 years I wrestled in New York, I didn't have a manager. And I did all my own interviews. From being able to talk to going, ah! It's quite a switch.
Right.
Never had a manager. And the idea was, why waste a manager on a guy that's only going to be here 3 months? So second time I come in, we did great business the first time. Second time I did great business. And next time I had Ernie as my manager, Grand Wizard. And he was fabulous, just really good. And we were friends from way back, so it was a good thing. I needed somebody to talk because now I had enough leverage and was over strong enough in the WWWF that we needed somebody to talk for me when I wasn't available.
All right.
So that was Ernie. That's the role he played. Later on, Lou played that role, and then Freddie Blassie. And Freddie was not about money with Freddie. Freddie was like a brother with me. We were really close. And first time he managed me in the Gardens, made a pretty good payoff. And I hugged him and I give him $100. Now, $100 for Fred Blassie doesn't mean anything. But he cried, he had tears in his eyes. He said, "You're the first guy that ever had enough respect for me to show me $100. He says, "Not the money." So, we bonded pretty good.
You went away for a little bit and you came back, and I think it was around 1984 when you returned. And then you were being managed by Mr. Fuji. What are your memories about being managed by Mr. Fuji? And did he ever rib you?
Really, it goes way back before. He tried to pull a rib on me, and we reversed it on him when he first came into the WWF. This would have been in the probably early 70s or late 70s. First time he came into Tanaka. Tried to rib on me, and I had everybody in the locker room for over a month not talk to him. He'd walk in, "Hi," and everything. It wasn't a month, maybe a week and a half. 2 weeks. The time blends after a while. And he was ready to leave the territory. We were driving him nuts. And finally I said, "You remember that rib that pulled on me? Brother, we just pulled one on you, old brother, never." So he didn't mess with me.
Right. Did you find it more competitive around this period of time? Because it seemed like a lot of guys were now fighting for the top heel spot.
You got to understand the business. You talking about 84?
Yeah.
My career was over. You got to remember, I was at the age where it was over, really and truly, or should have been. And Vince Sr. was still alive in 84, I think. 83, 84, he died right at that.
Right around that period of time.
Yeah. He called me in my last Garden show that I saw him alive. And we'd gone way back, and I told you, I traveled with him. When I would come in, I'd do the True TVs with him, and later on when Benny would come in, he would drive, and the old man would sit here, I'd sit here, and Ernie Roth would sit here until he died. So it was pretty close. And he called me in the Gardens, my last Garden show, I was going back to teach. He had a tear in his eye. He said, "George, this is going to be your last run." He said, "You're at an age where we don't want to push you so far that it becomes ridiculous. You've been a top star here. We want to leave you with that, leave the fans with that impression." And I had a tear in my eye too. It was coming to not because of the business, because of a relationship.
Right.
It was coming to an end. And we kind of shook hands, and that was the end of my career, as far as I was concerned. He died that spring, and I got a call from Vince Jr. wanted me to come back in. He had this idea, and I didn't think it was a very good idea. But I came back in, and we played as a heel for a while with it. And then that's when we did the little switch. And then they wanted me to quit teaching, and I didn't think that would work. But I had 25 years of coaching, so I was really ready to quit teaching and coaching. So as we made that switch to Babyface, or whatever you want to call it, I call it from being a serious heel to a cartoon character. But the business was becoming a cartoon character, so
right.
So I accepted that challenge, and I went that direction. And it worked out really, money-wise, it worked out great. I was right underneath the Hulk most of the time with Randy Savage. And then one of the greatest matches they ever had was probably Randy and the Dragon, what's his name? Steamboat. And that was kind of the end of the cartoon thing for me, really, too. But my career was over before that. When me and Mr. McMahon had the discussion, that's when it probably should have been over. And then greed took over in my part, and I made a ton of money after that.
How different was Vince Jr. compared to his dad?
It was very much like his dad at first, but as things changed, and it was not his fault. become a corporate business. It just started expanding and growing and going. I love Vinny. I really do, but more like a son than a.
Right.
There's different levels of looking at people. I don't look down at them. I don't mean that at all. But the reason that I have so much respect for him is business was changing, the climate in our society was changing, and he had balls, he had real balls. WrestleMania 1, if that hadn't worked,
Would have been over.
He lost it all. WrestleMania 3, 2. Which one? Where they had the 3 shows? Chicago.
That was 2.
Okay, I was sitting next to him in the Nassau Coliseum, and if that wouldn't have worked, in other words, he went from one show to another show via the satellites, if that would have failed, he had to give all that money back he lost, and I was sitting right next to him, and when we connected from New York to Chicago, yeah, and then we connected from Chicago to LA, yeah. I mean, to me that's what it's all. I mean, he was out on the edge,
right,
and he could have been Mr. Nothing. A thing that happened way back when, and this is loyalty. I've always been loyal to a weakness at times, and Vince is pretty loyal. We had a little falling out there at the end because I'll explain that later on if you want to know it. But early on, Vince Jr. had just really come with his dad for maybe 2 or 3 years, and there was a guy by the name of Ironhorn that started promoting IWA, and they ran a show in competition in Roosevelt Park in New Jersey, right across the river from the Gardens. And I'm wrestling with Bruno the following Saturday. That was a Friday show, I believe, I'm telling you, right? Most of our shows were on Monday, but I think this was a Saturday show. And they had a show on Friday night, and Vince Sr. paid the New Jersey Commission, and he paid some other ruffians to go to the show. Savoldi's kid was one of them.
All right.
And it was an outdoor show, and when the show started, they rushed the ringside seats and started a riot.
Huh.
And the rain, it wasn't real bad, but it was a misty type, it was a cool night. So a lot of bad things went on. The following night, I was a main event with Bruno Sammartino. And the Gardens advance was really down because of this deal over here. They had all the superstars. They had Ernie Ladd, they had Ivan Koloff, they had the masked Mexican, what's his name? No Mascaras.
Right.
And they had quite a card. And one of the guys that was helping me book it was George Cannon from Detroit. He had called me, and they offered me more money than I was going to make that whole summer to show up at Roosevelt Gardens, not necessarily wrestle, but just my hand in the air, be part of that organization, then no show the Gardens the next night. And if I'd done that, probably wrestling history today would not be the same, because I would have killed the Gardens. But Vince had been so good to me, and we had that relationship, and I had a relationship with Bruno and all that stuff, that I didn't even bat an eye. I said, no, I can't do that. And I was talking to George Cannon, who was talking for Ironhorn, and the money was astronomical. I said, I can't do that. It's not about money. My life, I'm not a prostitute. I can't sell out. And then he said, well, we'll call you in Vince's office. And this was in the old arena, Philadelphia Arena. We'll call you in Vince's office. We'll talk money to you there, and they'll have to pay you more money. You can really put the screws to them that way, collect money from them and hurt them that way. I said, no, I got plenty of leverage. That would not be good leverage for me. So I turned it down. I turned the whole thing down. And I'm not, I think I did the right thing. But if not, then where would Vinny be today?
True.
And but more importantly, where would wrestling be today? Who could have carried the ball like he has? Even because where are the kids going to come from? They didn't have the territories. They learned how to work.
Back around this time in 84, 85, how crazy was the drug and party scene?
It was getting strong, really strong.
Just because of the traveling and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, you had to have uppers to go to the ring. You had to have downers to sleep. You had to have steroids to look good. I never went that route. But you had to do certain things to survive. I worked 87 straight days when we started the road thing.
Right.
And that's when I quit teaching and went full time. And it's 87 straight days. And 7 days in a row is New York, LA, New York, LA, New York, LA. I mean, it was San Francisco.
Crazy.
East Coast, West Coast, all the way. I mean, it's killing you.
Did you get mixed up into any of the pills at the time, or not really?
I got really hooked on halcyons,
right.
Sleeping pills, so I could sleep at night. I was never involved in the other stuff. A little bit, I never really got into the cocaine, but I'd sniff some of it, just enough to see what it was all about. Never did anything for me. Never did do marijuana much. I smoked 2 or 3 times. Like, this is a joke. I mean, I just didn't need it.
Right.
I was pretty high on life, I think. But it was all around me. It was all around me. Steroids. I mean, I can remember even as an agent, guys punching each other in the butt with needles, and needles laying all over the place. It was huge. It was legal. That's what people forget about.
Right. Back then.
There was no law against it. It all started with the WWF, I think. I think the things that are going on today in baseball and football or whatever is really out of touch. It's not reality. This Mitchell report, the guys have always done whatever they can to be the top of their game. Guys were taking uppers. When I was in college in 1961 and 62, we were taking them in college. They were taking them in pro football, scooping bennies to be up for a ball game and taking them at halftime again. It wasn't steroids. They weren't around yet. I got a whole history on steroids. Where did they come from? How did they start? Alexis. Do you remember that name? You probably don't. Alexis was a power lifter in Russia in the 60s. And they were killing us in the Cold War, and they was killing us in powerlifting in the Olympics. We sent some people over to find out what they were doing, and they come back and ended up somewhere around York, Pennsylvania. I don't want to talk about that too much, but there's a lot of people involved in it that don't want to hear about it.
What are your memories of Roddy Piper around this hour, 84, 85?
Roddy was crazy. He was crazy. He's fun, wild. My first really recollection of Roddy, he come into the territory, and these guys were coming in, and I was looking at a lot of them like, young punks, just to be honest with you, because I've been there for 20 years.
Right.
And Roddy come in, and I gained a lot of respect for Roddy. First time I remember him, he says, "Can I ride with you, George?" I said, "I don't have a car." He says, "I'm going to rent a car. You ride with me." So I got in the car with him. We were riding down the street. He said, "I'll stop and get some beer." I'm figuring a 6-pack. He comes out with a case. And I throw bottles over the back seat. He was like, "What? This guy's nuts." And then he said to me, he says, after about 4 beers, he said, "I wanted to ride with you for a reason. I got something I got to tell you." I said, "What's that?" He says, "You are a detriment to the business. You're ruining the business." I said, "I beg your pardon." He says, "We take guys' heads and run them into the turnbuckle, and you go over and bite them and show them it's just got stuffing in there." I said, "Roddy, who's stupid?" I said, "You ever see me run my head into the turnbuckle and take a bump from it?" I said, "I take the bump over the top and hit the post and come back." And I said, "That's how I lose my matches. I've never taken it and do one of those 10 things, and I've never done it to somebody, and I've never done it myself. So if you're dumb enough to do that, don't blame me. Look in the mirror, buddy."
That's good.
And we got real tough respect for each other at that time. Roddy was a great worker. He was a better talker than he was worker.
Right.
Believe me. His work was because everybody's work was You couldn't work at the time. The guy that I got a lot of respect for was the model,
Rick Martel?
Rick Martel. Because we're telling you, Rick early on was a great worker, ring technician, call him and tell a story. Now he's doing the same match every night, and it's a routine, I call that performing instead of working. And I talked to him and I said, "Why are you doing the same match every night?" He said, "George, we fly every morning. We get to a town, we go to the gym, we do our diet, we do a workout, we do whatever we got to do, and then we go to the ring." He said, "That's one thing I don't have to worry because I know what I'm doing." So the business had changed. No one was working anymore. So, that's why I say Dada.
Any good Iron Sheik stories from around this hour?
Oh, you didn't want to go there.
Huh.
The Iron Sheik was beautiful. The Iron Sheik was beautiful. First time, in fact, you saw him today.
Yeah.
And I walked in, you heard the story.
Yeah.
First time he's, going to work with George Steele. And he says to Nikolai Volkov, I wasn't there, he goes, "What am I going to do with this animal? You don't take a suplex, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do nothing." Nikolai said, "Just listen, and you'll have a great match." We come, and I didn't know this conversation, so we come back afterwards, and he's all, "Oh, thank you, because we had him screaming, USA, USA, USA. And he didn't have to take a suplex. He didn't have to get kicked in the teeth. Later on, if you ever notice, he's got false teeth up here now. They used to be real loose. Did you know them when they fell out?
Right.
Front teeth. I got them.
Wow.
Boom, I'm the one that got them. So it happened in Toronto. And I was going to use a chair on him. And I grabbed a chair that wasn't a folding chair. It was, a sitting chair.
Right.
So I'm going to bring it down this way. And in our business, you got to trust your opponents. The Sheik and Nikolai are the biggest blockers in the world. So as I'm coming down with that chair, his hands go up here. And so I come back after the match, and he says, "You knocking my teeth. You almost knocking my teeth out. What do you do?" I said, no, you almost knocked your teeth out. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, I got a chair. He said, I brought it right here. You put your hands up to block it, right? Yeah. I said, all right, you block it here. Where does the back go? He said, in my mouth. I said, you knocked your teeth out. He says, you're right, George. I'm sorry.
Were you surprised around this period of time? This is when Vince was pretty much taking over all the different territories and they were getting pretty popular. Were you surprised at how Vince was pretty much becoming a monopoly at the time?
No. I go back to the Eddie Ironhorn story I was telling you about when they were going to competition.
Right.
Vince was in the car at that time. I was riding with Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. And Vince Sr. was really beside himself. That's when Vince Sr. started doing TV on Channel 9. So, because it used to be on a Spanish station midnight.
Right.
And he started doing Channel 9 to compete with Ironhorn. Well, when he knocked Ironhorn out of the box, he still had Channel 9. Let's move the story forward. Vince did not start the war. The NWA first came into Baltimore and was talking about they were going to come into New York, so on and so forth. But Vince, because of the Ironhorn thing, was itching for a fight. He was really itching for one, the kid.
Right.
And so when they come in there,
I think they did the Meadowlands. They did Flair Steamboat there, maybe.
They did the Meadowlands, but before that, they did the first one was Baltimore.
Right.
Baltimore. Then they did the Meadowlands. And they were talking about the gardens and the whole bit. That's when Vince took the mitts off and he started buying their talent, everybody else's talent, and it was a whole new ball game. And that's when That's when I became a cartoon character. I mean, now we're not wrestling. We're just selling tickets any way we could.
What are your memories of the very first big match that you had with Hogan and Mean Gene Okerlund? Still talked about to this day.
Oh, cartoon. God, that's a cartoon. I was pissed. It was in Minneapolis. And Fuji was, my manager.
Right.
And we'd done a match on TV to set this up. Well, whenever I did a return match or something on TV to set a match up, as a heel, I'd beat somebody up and they'd come back and I would run. In this case, I never beat anybody up. He just beat us up and we ran. And I thought, this is stupid. This ain't going to work. But Hulk Hogan was not what we had been. Hulk Hogan was a whole new package. And I'll cut on that a little bit too. But when we did that match, we got there and they said, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and Hogan's going to do this. And Mean Gene's going to sit on top of him. Going, Jesus, criminy, this is a cartoon. And the business hadn't become a total cartoon yet. It was still a heel. And it really didn't settle right with me. About 2 months later is when I understood the wrestling business had changed. And you might not have seen this, but I got video if you want to buy one. It's the wedding between Butcher Vachon and his wife, and it was a whole cartoon thing. And then for the reception, Vince went out and bought a bunch of vodka and booze and got us all drunk and taped that too. It was all done. It was, yeah, absolutely. The pie fight, everything was a shoot. When it was all over with, after slipping and sliding with the pies and the champagne squirting and all, I went over and I put my arm around him because I was still it felt like I was a kid. And I put my arm around him. I said, you're not going to show this on TV, are you? He said, why not? I said, because you'll kill the business. He said, do you really think so? I said, no, I know so. He said, well, we're going to find out. He put it on 3 shows in a row on USA Network, 3 weekends in a row. And we went from like number 15 on USA to number 1. That's when I realized the business was changing. Being a cartoon was funny. It was going to make a lot of money. And it's when to me, that video shows the change in the business.
I remember that too.
Me doing the thing in the Tuesday, Saturday Night Main Event when I switched from babyface to heel. That wasn't planned. I mean, the switch was planned. Right. But what happened wasn't planned. We didn't talk that kind of stuff. First of all, I was a hardhead. Somebody started telling me to do something. I was going to do something else. Eric, my manager, that knows a little bit about that. I'm just a hardhead when it comes to stuff like that. And so when they started talking about it, I was going to go out. I was going to be in a 6-man tag, and I was going to go to tag them, and they were going to turn their back, and they were going to leave me. And that was kind of the end of George Steele, supposedly. Right. And that's the way it was supposed to be, probably. No one knows what was in the back of Vince's mind. They sent Lou out, figuring they'd get a couple more matches out of me. No one told me what to do. It was just like somebody intervened. I dropped on my knee, put my head in his belly, and he started popping little pats on my head like I was a little sick animal. And the roof went off the ceiling. It was an immediate, serious baby face. Now, I had two options. Because nobody told me what to do. I could have went out and just been a powerful, he owned the territory, so it could be like that. Dick the Bruiser. Not sell anything, just go out and boo, because Vince wasn't going to tell me what to do. He wouldn't. He never did, ever. And the other thing, I could go out and try to be a babyface, and that's what I did. My wife's my inspiration anyhow. She said, why are you doing that? She said, you're not there just, you should just go out and just pound people and screw it. Pound them till they're dead like you always did. I said, well, I'm a babyface now, and I act like I shouldn't have done that. It was a huge mistake on my part. But I asked Bobby Heenan. I said, what do you think about me going out and just being strong? He said, well, like Dick the Bruiser. He said, well, Dick the Bruiser owns the territory. You don't own this one. You better not do that. He was wrong. I was wrong. I should have done it. My first, we were talking about earlier on, learning about the wrestling business. Mm-hmm. My wife didn't come to many matches. A pretty smart lady. And she, one time, as a student, I'd walk to the ring with my cap and gown on.
All right.
Get in the ring, take it off, and become the student. She said, why do you do that? Why do you have to wait to the ring to become your persona? Why don't you come out of the locker room and be what you're going to be? If you remember George Steele coming out after that, chairs flying, run through the crowd, chase people, boom, boom, boom. My wife told me to do that. It wasn't any creation group of people or writers.
Right.
And it just makes a lot of sense. If you're going to be a wild man, you're a wild man from the time you come out the door. Now, my character, I could be sitting there having a smoke, because I smoked in those days, shooting the breeze, telling stories, and say, George, you're on now. I walked through the door and George turned on. I mean, it's just automatic. I don't know how that worked. It was just an automatic thing with me. It always was. It wasn't, okay, I'm going to go out and do this here, this here, this here. Never thought like that at all.
When you were in hotels and on the road and fans were around, did you go into character or did you?
It depended.
Right.
See, the mystique of going both ways. I'm not Pat Patterson. You're going both ways with the fans. Keeps it powerful. If you come up to me and say, George, how you doing? I'm fine. You come up to me 2 weeks later, how you doing, George? Ah, you just dropped your drawers, put them back on. And I have got over with you. Now, if I did this all the time with you, then I'm just another guy. If I did this all the time with you,
you don't know.
Nah. But if I do it back and forth, see, I started the wild stuff in Pittsburgh again. I would do great interviews. I was a pretty good interviewer, by the way, when I came to the Northeast. Do really good interviews, and then I start going, and I'd snap, like a psychological thing.
Right.
And then I'd come back and be normal again. So my whole character was always kind of done that way. When I went off the roof and I was pissed when I did this. I was doing an interview, a very good interview. I had a manager standing by me there, might have been Fred Blassie, but I'm doing the talking. And Vince said, cut. No one ever cut one of my interviews before. He said, well, the people are calling you an animal. You're making too much sense for an animal. Why don't you go a little kooky? Now I'm hot.
Right.
Now I'm kicking. Okay, you want a kooky? So they come back on. He asked me a question. And he said, that's what I want. I went, shit.
Right.
I mean, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
But that's when now he's the boss, and that's what he wants, and that's not what I want to be. And that's when it changed, but it worked out really pretty good. I did better interviews than any of the guys. I was a better talker than Piper. I'll tell you why. Listen carefully. Piper would take 1,000 words to tell you the story. Tell you something about that too. I was wrestling, and this is a good example of the one-man gang. Had a mohawk with a tattoo on each side. Here's my interview. Mean Gene says, what are you going to do with a one-man gang? And he asked me again. Tattoo! So now I know who he is. One word. What about the tattoo? What are you going to do when you wrestle him? Biker! He's a biker. Now I got your, and people are saying, they're helping me say because I'm biker. And then, biker. Then my next line was, you're picturing a biker, tattoo. Tricycle. In other words, he's not a tough biker. And then, hurt. Hammerlock. 4 words. everybody watching the interview for 35, 40 seconds is saying the words I'm trying to say. Rather than spitting out 35 or 40, I got my message out, and they're feeling sorry for me. They can't talk.
Right.
And I'm going to the bank. You tell me.
It's good stuff.
And a lot of people that are real purists now really don't like George Steele because they made that turn. Screw them. You know what I mean?
What about Jimmy Snuka? A lot of people who worked with Jimmy said it was sometimes he was hard to work with because he was messed up. Did you get along with him?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of guys that were messed up in those days. If you had a routine and were doing a performance with him, and I was a worker. I could work with you do anything you want to do, and I can turn it into a positive. I wasn't into it. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this. Hell, I'm not smart enough to remember all that stuff. But I knew if you did this, I could do this, and I knew how to sell it to the crowd. And if I was going to do something to him, I would, like say I was going to use a gimmick on him.
Right.
I'd say, sell this! Gimmick! Boom! And he would sell it. And then I would yell that loud. People at the crowd, they sit in the crowd. I'd call him a name. You SOB!
Right.
Sell this! They're thinking I'm screaming at them. I learned that way back. I was wrestling Haystacks Calhoun. And they wanted him to get blood.
Right.
Well, Haystacks Calhoun was always willing to get blood, but he was afraid to cut himself. So he said, well, you cut me. Oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
You got a deal there, bud. So the fans saw me cut him. Why would I hide it?
Right.
I mean, come on. Sneak, I'm going to cut him. Ning! He used something on him. Yeah, okay.
Right. Fits in.
You got heat. And I was doing it to myself, a different story.
Sergeant Slaughter, working with Sergeant.
Would you wake up?
Yeah. Sergeant Slaughter?
Sergeant Slaughter. Sergeant Slaughter came in and had a great run. His first time in. Had a great run. At this point, I've been in maybe 11 or 15 years, somewhere around there. And he come in, we're sitting at what I call the King's Table. I'll explain that later on if you want to know about that. But we're sitting at what I call the King's Table. And his run's over with. He's had his 7-month run. He was there before I got in, and I'm coming in and I'm doing my thing. And it's time for him to go back to Carolinas, really. And so he's finishing up. So he's we're all sitting at dinner, and he's begging Vince, I don't want to leave because he's making so much money.
Right.
He doesn't realize that if he stays, his money's going down. And he's begging to stay, which kills his leverage. I'm thinking, what kind of business guy is this?
Right.
So after dinner that night, I was talking to him, and I said, Sarge, leave. When you come back, put your demands in. That's when you'll have your leverage. You don't have your leverage right now. And the more you beg, the weaker you get. And he quit begging. He left. He went back to the Carolinas and come back a huge superstar the next time around.
I remember that, yeah.
But that's exactly what happened. You just don't beg promoters. I mean, my mentor, Bert Ruby, told me early on, when I was starting to learn the business, never call the promoter. Never call the promoter Eric Sims or anybody else looking for work. Because now you're on their terms. We're talking about leverage again. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yep.
If they call me, now I'm in charge of the deal. If I call them, they're in charge of the deal. I never called, in my 40 years in the business, anyone saying I need some work. First of all, I never needed the work.
Right.
Secondly, it's stupid business to do that.
Now, what are your...
Getting an education? Are you?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
It's the art of professional wrestling. I guess not my last question, what I'm talking about. We still got some more to go. One of the most important feuds of your career, I would say, to the casual fans would be with Randy Savage. You're most known for that feud. What are your memories of working with Randy?
Randy was a great worker. He had great work ethics. Randy was very, very jealous of Elizabeth. It was not a show.
I was going to ask you about that.
Very, very jealous of Elizabeth.
Did you find it hard to work with Randy because of that?
No.
Right.
Other guys did.
Right.
I found it easy. Because what would I do? I would tell him, Randy, don't worry about me. God, I'm 50 years old. She's, I got a daughter older than her.
All right.
And he'd kind of relax. And I said, just as he stepped to the ring, I said, but boy, I've had a great run with some of these young broads around here. And run around, talk, walk away. And he's like, ah! And he was hot. I played with him all the time like that. Just because I got out of the ring what I wanted from him.
Right.
And I think Randy liked me. We go way back to when his dad was wrestling in Detroit. And he was a little kid, so I knew him way back when. I think there was some respect there. In fact, I worked with him one time early on when he was still in Detroit. And he was a little skinny kid, no juice at all on him.
Right.
And I beat him up pretty bad. But I was working. And he told me later on when we were working on a program, he said, Jesus Christ, George, You went out and just beat the tar out of me and come over afterwards and said thank you. You thought you were mad at me. But I worked stiff. And so, we went way back. Randy, I think I was a great platform for Randy. I think people still remember those matches. And I think he went from there to the next level of being the WWF champion. And I think that was a springboard that got him there to work with all.
How was Elizabeth to work with?
Beautiful.
Good.
Sweetheart. Really a sweetheart.
What are your thoughts of her passing?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, lifestyles. Those are the things that really tear me up in the business. Have you ever been to my website?
No.
You should.
What is your website? So you
GeorgeAnimalSteel.com.
Okay.
You should go there, and I got wrestlers. I show pictures of Christmas, birthday cards, and Christmas cards that I got from family pictures of all these different guys that have died and left their family. I mean, that's where it hits me in the chest.
Right.
I've got Owen Hart and his kids, and Mr. Perfect and his kids, all little kids at the time. But I saved those things, and when all this started happening, I just put them out there because that's the reason I wrestled was not because I want to be a wrestler. I wanted to do the best for my family. And those guys were in the same boat. They got hooked up on some other stuff, but they were there to support their family. People laugh today. I go on a website called Root Zoo sometimes. And it's a sports website, but they really knock wrestling on there quite a bit. It's all fake. Wrestling's never been fake. I mean, I've been in the wrestling business longer than most and still alive. It's never been fake. What you see is real. Do we know who's going to win? Yeah. Do we know who's going to lose? Yeah. It's predetermined. But when you're working, I used to scream at people if they were those limp, lay it in, because I'm going to lay it in.
Right.
And wrestling is one of the toughest businesses there is when it's done right. And way back when it was you had to play all the games, but you had better be tough or they'd eat you alive.
Was it weird for you to be a babyface around this period of time because you were a heel for so long? Or?
I was never really a babyface. I was a cartoon.
Right.
But an example of what I did and how I could do it. This is crazy, but it worked. We're in Madison Square Gardens. We're in a 6-man tag. The opponents are, I think it's John Studd and somebody else, and Bobby Heenan.
Right.
And me and the All-American team that I went babyface with, Rotunda and Wyndham.
Yeah.
Okay. And they want to get out of it. They don't know how to end the match. They're sitting there saying, how are we going to, they don't want to beat anybody.
Right.
I said, let me finish the match. We don't want you to beat anybody. I said, listen to me. So I go out, and here's the match. We got him going really hot. I jump out of the ring. I run in. I grab a chair. I come in the ring. I go after Heenan. He dives out. I go after, he dives out. So I go after my guys. Right. I'm crazy, right? They dive out. I turn around. Who's there? The referee. Bang! Disqualification. I'm better than ever.
Right.
I mean, and no one got beat. No one got hurt. And it was just, thinking.
Did you notice Vince change personality-wise as the company got more successful?
That's a great question. The changes that I saw in him were necessary. He's tried to be one of the boys. And Vince don't know this to this day. When Vince first became part of the WWF, working for his dad as a little kid, before he was even an announcer. Right. And then the announcer from the ring, the TV guy from Pittsburgh, what was his name? He did all the TV in Pittsburgh for Bruno. Great TV announcer. They brought him into Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia to do it here. And the name will come to me in a minute. And he asked, lo and behold, after about a year of doing the TV in Philadelphia, he asked for a raise. Vince Sr. fired him instead of giving him a raise and brought Junior in. Everybody loved this guy. I can't think of his name right now. I love him. I can't think of his name. It'll come. Anyhow, everybody loved him. So when Vince came in to replace him, everybody hated Vinny, the brat, the boss's kid, getting a break, and we lost, a lot of heat on him. And Vince Jr. learned the promotion business from Ernie Roth. When he first started running and doing towns up in Cape Cod in that area,
right?
Ernie Roth was his partner, and he taught him how to promote via the old man. Every time they rode together, it was the chief, at this point, wants to become involved in promotion, Strongbow, and McMahon. And he's pumping him to get all the information to get how to work a match. That's how he's learning how to work a match.
Right.
The old man come to me. He said, so much, and I was always pulling ribs and was in and out. And I was really had a great relationship with the talent before I became an agent. And he asked me, he says, could you get some of the heat off my kid, off Junior? So I started inviting him to my little parties, my little get-togethers, and ding, 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 ding. One night we had, Patera was in the room, 3 or 4 heels, a couple baby faces, and Vinny was there with us, having a few beers. And they might have been smoking something that I wasn't smoking.
Right.
But, we were just kicked back in the room. And this guy come in with one of the wrestlers, with his girlfriend, Jewish guy. And he was acting like he knew it all. And he walked in, he says, oh, now Vince, no respect from the boys at this time. This is when it switched for him. I knew it was all a show. You guys all drink together and all buddies. Now, this is when kayfabe was strong. Vince came off the bed that he was sitting on, never touched the ground hardly, had the guy through the door and was going to throw him over the second deck onto cars when Kim Patera caught him. He would have killed the guy probably. Huh. But at that point, he became the real deal because he was protecting kayfabe. And that was very huge back in those days. And kayfabe was never, ever ran by the promoters. That was the boys' deal. It was our business. We never wanted the promoters to have our business. And if you're coming in and screwing my business, you got to deal with me. So when he did that, he became more popular with the wrestlers. The word went around right away that he protected kayfabe, and then he was accepted.
Wow.
Then later on, he wanted to be one of the boys, and that's when he screwed up. It was a big party, and there was cops coming, ding, ding, ding. Found out, no, you can't be one of the boys. You got to be the boss.
Is that when I think Bret Hart was telling us about that story? They given him the finishes and stuff on the bed, I think.
And then what?
They went in somebody's hotel room, and a lot of the boys were giving Vince their finishes.
Probably the same night. He was drunk on a skunk.
Yeah. I guess around WrestleMania, too, what was your thought? Were they ever going to put the IC belt on you at all? Were they ever going to give you the title? The IC belt? No. Okay.
Let me tell you about titles.
You didn't need it because you're already over, so.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And you put a title on a guy that's good, but needs something.
Right, you didn't need it.
If you don't need it, why give it to you? Why waste it?
Did you think when they brought Mr. T in, it kind of exposed the business a little bit, or
we were already exposing it? He was just another deal on
puzzle.
When they got me hot was when they brought the refrigerator in.
Oh yeah, for the
Chicago deal.
The Rumble.
Bob Wolf was the guy that brought
Cyndi Lauper.
No, Bob Wolf was the guy that brought the union into football, and he brought the union into basketball. He was the first agent. Very dear friend of mine. He wanted to organize wrestling. And I laughed at him. I said, there's no way. You can't organize wrestling because it's different than basketball and football. It's a totally different deal. The only way we could ever have a union in wrestling is if you make Vince McMahon Sr. the president of the union.
Right. And
then he's already there. He won't work. And the guys will work for less. You cut each other's throat.
What about British Bulldogs? What were they like outside the ring?
Great talent. Outside the ring, they were idiots.
You saw Dynamite rib a lot of guys?
Yeah. Great guys, though. Great guys.
When we did an interview with Bruno, he talked about when he came back in '86, he was really miserable. What are your memories of Bruno when he came back for that little brief run?
Bruno was doing commentary at the time, I think, more than a run. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the period of time.
He did an angle with Piper, and they did the tag matches.
Yeah. Well, he was doing TV.
Right.
And he came up to me one night, and he's telling me, because we were close. We were real close for a lot of years. He said, George, what do you think about this stuff going on, all this cartoon stuff and da-da-da-da-da-da? Well, I'm already doing a little bit of the cartoon. I said, watch my match tonight. Then ask me.
Right.
That's the night that Junkyard Dog did the same stuff, and I started dancing with the kids and all that stuff. I come back, he come up to me, you're one of them. I said, yeah, Bruno, I'm a worker. Learn how to do it.
That's great. What was JYD like to work with?
Oh, JYD was he was fantastic. JYD, George Steele, and probably Tito Santana were 3 guys that like to stir the crap.
Right.
And really make it stink in the locker rooms. We'd start stories and ribs, and JYD would always tell people how much money he made. He would be lying. He'd tell me he made a lot more than what he really did.
Right.
And and then he'd start believing it. Because wrestlers bullcrap so much on the road. They tell so many stories, they start believing the stories, even if they're not true. They're their stories, and you believe them.
Right.
Who's kidding who here? Part of the work, I guess. Anyhow, he's going on and on with that. And finally, I said, is that all you got? He said, what? Because he's lying.
Right.
Is that all you got? Well, they're really screwing you. And he turned around. what did you get? And I wouldn't answer. I said, well, that's none of your business. It's business. And so he really, but he was fun. The Junkyard Dog, two things that was great about the Junkyard Dog. Number one, we'd go into a town, and he was getting pretty high.
Right.
He'd say, I'm going for a walk. I'm going to my hood.
Right.
And he'd come back the next day. I've been to the hood. The funniest thing is, back to the real life. We're at WrestleMania, maybe 2 or 3, one of those. And my wife are talking to each other. His wife was pretty sharp, by the way. So was he, but in a different way.
Right.
And she says, dog, he got hotel syndrome. My wife said, what? She said, yeah, the dog got motel syndrome. He come home, he got motel syndrome. Pat said, my wife says, what's that? She says, oh, he leaves the light on, he leaves the TV on, he takes a shower, he throws the towel on the floor. It's like motel syndrome. You got to learn to get it. So he was just living at home like he was on the road.
That's great.
And I thought it was pretty funny.
What about Honky Tonk? What was it like working Honky?
Oh, Honky Tonk was beautiful. He was beautiful. He did his gimmick. I mean, 100%. He knocks everybody now, but he was a pretty good guy, really.
Right.
And he was a good worker. Not a great worker. He was a better character. I'm going to teach you. Yeah,
right,
he was a better character. That was almost a gimmick sometimes, but yeah.
What about Jake the Snake?
Oh man, Jake the Snake was one of the finest minds in the business. I used to love Jake the Snake and to work with him and so on and so forth.
Psychology-wise and all?
Yeah, and I had a lot of fun with him until I changed my lifestyle a little bit, quite a little bit. But Jake was just a real great performer in the ring, great knowledge, and a lost soul. I mean, what else can you say? Just a lost soul. But I think the world of Jake, thought the world of Jake the way he was in the business.
You got to team up with the Crusher in Chicago in '87. Was that a good?
Did I?
Yeah, it was just like a one-time deal.
I don't remember. So it must have been real powerful.
And you said you liked working with Ricky Steamboat and stuff at WrestleMania 3.
I didn't say I liked working with him. Not at all. Didn't say that at all.
Okay.
I said they had one of the greatest matches of all time. It was a performance. It wasn't a work.
Right.
It was a performance.
I mean, like, working with him in the ring, not as far as wrestling, I'm saying.
I'll tell you what happened there.
Working around.
You want a story? You want a ring story? I'm all done working with Randy Savage. Our program's becoming history. And I'm turning the plug over to Steamboat to work with Randy Savage for WrestleMania. I think it was 3. My hometown. And we worked after we were switching around a little bit. We worked a match in Columbus, Ohio. It was a tag team match. Randy and Honky Tonk against me and Steamboat. And they're talking the match and they want to really get over because they're going towards WrestleMania. And I'm an old dummy, I guess. So they're telling me we weren't even part of the deal. So they finally said to me, what do you think? I said, well, I think that Honky Tonk and George Steele should start the match. Get it up there a little bit. Do something where they get me going a little bit and I give the hot tag to Steamboat. And he comes in and cleans house. So we take it from there and run with it. Oh no, we got to get over. We got to get it started. I'm thinking, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. They wanted to start the match, so they did. They went out. They did all their spots and all this here stuff. They tagged Honky Tonk for no reason at all, and they tagged me. The roof went off. I mean, it just killed everything they'd done.
All right.
So when the roof went off, they jump on the floor, and they start fighting each other, trying to get the attention back. Well, it's too late. And when they started fighting, I grabbed Honky Tonk. I said, relax. He said, why? I said, well, these idiots are out there fighting. Let them fight. When they're done, we'll start our match again. Why compete? So we did that. So, and towards the end, we got the people where we wanted them. We had a big pop. We go to the dressing room. And Randy's kind of egotistical with this stuff. Maybe talking out of school a little bit, but screw him. That's what I'm doing right now. This is a shoot. He starts complaining. But not complaining. They're hugging each other. Great match, great match. What do you think? I wasn't going to say a word. What do you think to me? I said, well, I thought it was the most stupid thing I've ever seen in my life. We wasted a lot of effort, got a lot more out of doing nothing than all the crap you did. And then we had to bring it back. We had to give it to you 3 different times to get it over the right way. And, it should have been done this way, this way, and this way. My thought in the business was never, ever, ever, ever to get George Steele over. It was always to get the match over. And whatever we were trying to do to get that over. And to get over, if they would have got the match over first and then got themselves over, it would have been dynamite.
Right.
But it got a big pop at the end, but a pop is not over. It's just a pop. Over is when drooling.
Right.
And so I told him that. And in the locker room was a referee, Honky Tonk Man, Randy, me, and Steamboat. The next day I go to Joe Louis for a show. And Randy comes into me like, I don't know what he thought. He can put his hand on me, I got to talk to you. He lost it all night, I'm sure. I'm sure Liz caught hell all night. I got to talk to you. So we go in the shower room. He starts this here stuff, hit me about 3 times in the chest. I grabbed him. I said, listen, you got me one more time. I'm going to take you and give you a swirly. You know what a swirly is?
Right.
I'm going to shove your head in the toilet and flush it. Jack Lanza's outside. He's an agent at the show. He's just dying laughing because he knows now that I'm hot. And Randy cooled down right away, and it kind of blew away. And then so I told him later on, I said, Randy, never, ever, ever come at me like that. This is when I started to get sick. I said, I'm not feeling real well, but I'm still a man. Don't ever do that again. And he didn't. So I had great respect for Randy, and I understood where he was coming from that. But he didn't want somebody to knock his work in front of other guys. But he asked me.
Right. So
I'm going to be a suck up and lie to him? That's not my style. But again, we had great matches. Probably made more money with Randy than I did Bruno.
Wow.
Because the payouts were great.
Right. Thank you. Were you surprised when Harley came over to the company?
Kind of.
Right.
Kind of. We were in Kansas City for a show. And the word was around that Harley was going to come and shoot Vince.
Oh, yeah, I heard about
He's going to shoot Vince. And it was a big rumor, And Harley's just a great big puppy.
Right.
He's a tough guy. He's a puppy, though. Most of the guys that are really tough guys are puppies when it comes down to it.
How did you get into the movie? Well, actually, right before we talk about Ed Wood's, WrestleMania 4, who came up with the idea of the mind puppet?
That's funny. That's a great question, too. Hillbilly Jim used to travel by himself. And he always carried an unstuffed animal with him. It was called Earl, the unstuffed dead dog, or whatever. Earl the dead cat.
Right.
Cat. Earl the dead cat had it looked like he'd been run over by a car and his eyes were crossed. He always threw that in his bed. Well, me and my wife would stand next door to him. He called us over and said, always loved you. He says, that thing, I said, what's that? He said, that's my Earl the dead cat, my traveling partner. I don't need a woman, I got my cat.
Huh.
I looked at him, I said, can I use that tonight? He said, what for? I said, can I use it tonight? I don't have to tell you my whole life, can I use it? So I'm doing an interview with Mean Gene. And he's asking me questions, and I got it behind. He doesn't know I got it. I think to pull ribs on him. I never told him anything about his character stuff. So he's asking me about the match, and I'm going, Earl! He asked me something else. Earl! I'm not wrestling Earl. And he says something. Finally, I said, Earl, dead cat! And I pulled the dead cat out, and he flipped out, and the fans at home, went crazy because there's this stuff animal. Well, Vince sees it. Next TV comes over and says, Jim, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He says, you're selling the heck out of Earl the Dead Cat. Why don't we come up with your own gimmick that we can sell that makes some money? I said, well, what would that be? He says, I don't know. You design it. So I designed mine. Right. I named it mine because when kids fight over a toy, what do they say? Mine! What does George say? Mine! And we had it so that it had the Velcro on it. So it hit the ring and it would go like this here. And I was getting too old to take a bump.
Right.
So I'd have my opponent get mad at me and take the doll and kick it. And when they kick the doll, I would sell it. They'd kick it again, I'd sell it. Huh. And then they could come back. No bumps, just make it come back. They took the bumps. So my doll carried my career another 2 years.
I was going to ask you, why did you end up leaving? And did you leave on good terms?
That's when I got sick.
Okay.
That's when I got sick. I left on great terms. I became an agent. I told you earlier, I never called and asked for anything.
Right.
Vince called me and wanted me to be an agent. This is after I'd been out about a year and a half, 2 years, real sick. And I told him no. I said, I've always been one of the boys, and to be an agent, you got to be a stooge. And there's no way that George Steele's a stooge. You can't do that.
Right.
And we went back and forth for about an hour. And then he said, talk to your wife. She's smarter than you are. And I'll call you back tomorrow and let's see. He says, because I really want you to be an agent. So he called me back the next day, and I talked to my wife. She said, what do you want to do? I said, I don't want to do that. It's just a bunch of crap, and I don't want to put up with the boys, and I don't want to do that. So I told him, I said, I don't want to do that. He said, well, why not? I said, well, because number one, you want your agents to be stooges on the boys. And I said, I'm one of the boys. I don't want to go that direction. And you want to hear what you want to hear, not necessarily what's going on. And that's not the way I play the game, Vince. He said, that's why I want you. He said, that's exactly why I'm calling you. I need somebody that'll tell us what's going on and be straight with us and straight with the boys. No BS about it whatsoever. He said, and I know how much you love the business. I know how much you respect the business. and that's why I want you to be an agent. He said, try it for 3 months. This is after about 15 minutes. Try it for 3 months, and if you don't like it, we'll just shake hands and say goodbye. I'm dyslexic. I'm very dyslexic.
Right.
So now he's got me counting money. So the first night I was like $1,000 short or some crazy thing, $100 short. So you give a report. I told him, I said, well, you want me counting your money? You lost 100 tonight, jerk. You know? But he understood that. And so he had me doing the money end of it for like 3 months, and I hated it because I'm every night it's like, that.
All right.
And so I was ready to quit, and he said, well, I'm going to make you the head agent, and you're going to be over the shows. Use your knowledge there. I really fell in love with that. I really liked it. Unfortunately, at that point in time, we started bringing some people in that thought they were bigger than the business.
I was going to ask you, did anybody give you any problems?
Well, they're not really problems. They were problems for themselves, but it was a pain in the butt. And
Any names?
yeah, there's a lot of names. But I felt like they didn't respect the business. Kayfabe was dead, so it might have been me out of sync with what was going on. Because I'm old school. And we used to have a dog by the name of Matilda that the Bulldogs had. Well, the big guy, the big strong guy that wrestled him all the time, wore the black pads. Names don't mean diddly to me. Anyhow,
He gimmicked the dog, right?
yeah. He'd bring the dog to the show. He'd walk through the people carrying Matilda. The Matilda would change him.
Ahmed Johnson?
No. This guy, he was the big Samoan's partner for tag team.
Warlord?
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to think of. The Warlord.
Right.
And he'd bring Matilda in through the crowd. I mean, it's like that. And then the guys were traveling together, and they were this, and all those years that I never saw Bruno in public.
Right.
All the time we talked, I never saw him in public. And we were very close friends. So it might have been me out of touch more than them.
They brought you back a couple times, and I think you were part of the Oddities, like a one-shot.
Yeah, the oddest of the oddities.
How'd you wind up doing the movie with, I guess, Ed Wood?
Because of my tremendous acting ability.
Right.
Just a fantastic actor. Because I look like the ugliest guy in the world. I look like Tor Johnson. Tor Johnson, they called me and started telling me about Tor. Tim Burton did. And he said, you're going to be a movie star just like Tim Burton. I think, and I'm going to be a movie star. Then I researched the part, and I found out that Tor Johnson was the first guy to make monster movies without makeup. That's how I got the part. I mean,
Did you like doing it?
Oh, we had a ball. We were out there for 3 months. It was really first class. And the movie turned out really pretty well. It was just a real great experience. I mean, who wouldn't like to be in them? I wasn't just an extra. I had a starring role,
Right.
Huge role, and it was great. In fact, towards the end, when we went out there, I told my wife, "No, we're not going to get excited about this crap. It's just a one-shot deal." But I started looking at agents just before we left, and they wanted me to move to Florida, to California, and I live in Cocoa Beach. I have a great lifestyle, and they said we can get you work all the time as a character actor and so on and so forth. You'll work every week. I said, no. If you can get me a good part, call me from Florida. I'm not moving here in this plastic. Crazy world. That's not my style. So I'm a beach guy.
How did you burn a bridge with Vince? Was it because of the Nitro appearance?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We never talked after that. It all started. See, I'm the leverage guy, remember? Right. And it all started before that, really. Vince called me. I told you that earlier to be an agent. When they decided to let me go, I felt like Vince owed me a phone call. Just again, it's a principle with me, and principles are very important. Vince had what's his name? The Oklahoma guy, Jim Ross, called me, and he told me that they were kind of done with me, and I resented that. I resented it big time. So I didn't say anything for a while. He said that Vince is going to call you. He did tell me that, and I knew that Vince wasn't going to call me because Vince is emotional, and when I can say things about our relationship, me, him, and his father, and he'll start tearing. And he's a great guy, very emotional. And emotional people are great people, usually. And so he couldn't call me, probably. But I knew that. And so I gave him about 1.5 years, 2 years. And they called me up and they wanted me to do this thing. And it was in Buffalo for WCW, where we did the thing with the kid that's running TNT now. Anyhow, I told my wife, I said, I give Vince a chance to call. I'm real huge, and so is Vince, on closing, being the closer, relationships. I said, I got to do closure on Vince before he does on me. He hasn't called me, so I'm going to do closure. I'm going to do this show. Yeah, I think they paid me, $4,000. So it certainly wasn't about the money. But it was about me sending a message. And boy, did that message go in there big time.
Huh.
I never, I got a lot of friends that were around and just called me, boy, he's really hot. That's all right. He had a chance to call me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I did that as just to close our relationship because a lot of things were going on and they were calling me to do this and do that. I didn't want to do it until he called me. They've called me 3 or 4 times to sign this Legends contract they're doing now. I haven't done it. I will not do it until he calls me. And he hasn't got I thought I liked him because he's got balls. He hasn't got the balls to call me because he knows that he was wrong.
You once said the biggest mistake you made was not taking Vince to a wrestling gym and to break him in.
Absolutely.
Can you expand on that?
Yes, I can. When I told you that when he first came in and his dad wanted me to get the guys to like him, I should have taken him at that time to the gym and taught him respect for the business like they were trying to teach me respect. I think everybody needed to have that, especially if you're going to be in that power seat that he was in. His dad never had that. It would have made him a better wrestling promoter today if he would have had more respect for the business, and he could still be doing what he's doing today, but he would respect the wrestlers more.
Are you surprised he's actually getting in the ring sometimes in wrestling, or?
No, not at all. That's his ego.
Right.
That's his ego. He always wanted to do that. His dad wouldn't let him wrestle. He dyed his hair blonde and wanted to be Dr. Bill Miller, Dr. Jerry Graham.
Right.
That was his idol. He wanted to wrestle when he was a little kid. He's always wanted to wrestle.
Who were your favorite opponents that you liked wrestling?
Bruno was a real hard worker. Loved working with Bruno. I loved working with Bobby Backlund. I loved working with Adrian Adonis. I say that and people go, oh. Yeah. Adrian is one of the greatest minds in the ring. He really knew how to work. I mean, it's just he was phenomenal.
Any regrets looking back on your career?
No. The best thing I did was keep it part-time.
Any good road stories or ribs that stick out?
Well, I think I told you a couple, 2 or 3 of them.
Oh, you were going to talk about Sergeant Slaughter at the table.
Huh? You
were going to talk about Sergeant Slaughter and the King's table?
Oh, well, that's not a rib so much.
Right.
The King's table was we'd do TV in Philadelphia. Mr. McMahon, the old man, would only come in for TV.
This is Hamburg?
And it would be Philadelphia, the old Spectre, the old arena,
right,
and then Hamburg. And in between, we would stop in Reading, Pennsylvania. And everything was, it was usually the heels, but the top guys would come to that. And that's when Sergeant Slaughter was begging him. But what I was going to tell you about the King's thing is there was a time when Bruno dropped the belt the first time. And I walked out, too. I called Vince and told him I had to go back and he had some football problems to do. That might have been the second time. I'm not sure which. But anyhow, I walked out and because of bad payoffs. And didn't have the leverage yet. So that had been the first time. And Bruno talked to me and we were going to go back and just work in Pittsburgh. So when Bruno dropped the belt, the story was that I'd broken used a chair and hurt his shoulder real bad. The doctor told him not to wrestle, but he came into Madison Square Gardens and wrestled Koloff and lost the title. So we had an angle with that. And the angle went when he come back. I walked out. So now the following year, Vince calls me up and wants to come back. When he called me up to come back, that's when I had my leverage. That's when I started making big money. And we're sitting at the King's table, and he looks at me and he says, I respect a guy, if he doesn't get a good payoff, complains about it, I always make it right. Which guys would complain to give him a couple of extra $200.
Right.
I looked him right in the eye, and he had his glasses on the end of his nose. I looked him right in the eye, and I came right at him a little bit. And I said, I got to tell you, I respect a promoter that pays me what I'm worth. And if I got to come back and beg for my money, he can kiss my ass. Huh. He sit back like this here, put his glasses back, never got another bad payoff.
Huh.
Leverage.
Do you think the character like George Animal Steele could still get over today?
Absolutely. I think the art of the work would be fantastic.
What do you think's wrong with today's wrestling?
I'm not sure anything's wrong. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. Wrestling has always been a business. It's a very successful business. I hear everybody knocking it and all this here. I think it had to change from what it was. But did you ever watch, before your time, a video of the Green Bay Packers when Vince Lombardi was coaching?
No.
They look like they were running in mud compared to what it is today. It's a different, play football different. Society's different. When Vince first brought one of the biggest stars he developed in was The Rock. when he first brought him in, he pushed him really hard. It was a real clean baby face, and it stunk. He didn't get over at all.
Right.
Turned him a little bit heel and changed it. The Rock got over with the eyebrow and the people's elbow. Not great stuff, but a great mind.
I guess, would you ever be shocked if you were to go back to do like a one-time appearance for Hall of Fame or something like that?
I probably wouldn't do that.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, Vince would have to call me.
Right.
He ain't gonna call me.
Huh. Are you surprised to see some guys still in the ring like Ric Flair? Are you surprised that some guys just don't know when to let it go?
That's sad, but I went a long time too. I mean, I was 50 years old and still working as a heel. So if you can do it, there's a place where you throw the ball in, and everybody's got to do it in their own way. I'm not going to criticize that.
You still wrestle today on the Indies? Like what's?
No. I wrestle to get out of bed.
Right.
I'm 70 years old.
Right.
I go to the Indies and I sign autographs. I like to talk to the fans because they couldn't do that earlier on. I enjoy interplay with the fans. I might get in the ring and have a manager, some little chubby guy, throw something at me and bite his arm and
Right.
eat a turnbuckle. And that's it. I know I don't wrestle. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm. Who was your favorite and least favorite bookers to work for?
You know what? How many bookers did I work for? I never worked for any bookers.
Vince, pretty much.
Who?
Vince was pretty much it.
Well, he was, yeah. And then he had Pat Patterson. I never really, when Pat was booking, I was already an agent. I never worked for a booker. The only time I worked for a booker was when I went to Atlanta, and I told you what I did.
Right.
I mean,
if you were to, I guess, put down 3 of your top matches for your grandchildren to watch, what would they be?
I said, please don't watch them. Any of my Bruno matches, they were class acts. Any of my Bobby matches, except a couple of them where I got really carried away using the foreign object. But any of the Bobby's matches, any of Bruno's matches, any of Pedro's matches, except when he couldn't hit me with his left hand.
Right.
They were all pretty good matches. Savage matches they've seen. I mean, they're there. Adrian Adonis. We had great matches, I'm telling you. He was the mastermind in the ring. We thought on the same page, so I guess I'm being egotistical. We were masterminds in the ring.
Favorite town?
Favorite town, New York City, probably. I love New York. I love Boston. I love Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia fans are the wildest of them all.
Definitely.
I just, as a heel, I loved being hated. I just really loved. We didn't even get into my learning disabilities and all that, which is a whole other story. Sometime we might do that. It's pretty powerful stuff. It's the basis for the whole character of George Steele, because I really lived it as a kid.
Really?
It was a real deal. Playing football, I almost lost my tongue. Sticking my tongue out with 4 face masks, and couldn't talk in high school for about a year. And the teacher asked me if a new teacher come in the second semester. Our teacher got pregnant, and then a new teacher come in, and she had the kids stand up and tell their name and a little bit about themselves. And I just bit my tongue off in October, and this was like January. I couldn't shut my mouth. It was swollen, and it was black. They didn't know if it was going to take or not. They put a disc in there. That's why I have a little lisp.
Right.
And and I was dyslexic, so I had a learning disability on top of it. And she asked me to stand up, and all the kids to stand up and tell their name, what they were going to do for Christmas, or what they did for Christmas. I said, "Mom, and she said, "Sit down, dummy. You can't even talk."
Ooh.
And I didn't speak again until I was a sophomore in college. I wouldn't talk in classes or anything back because I had a learning disability. They would send me to the gym, so I become a great athlete.
Right.
Not necessarily a great student, but I do have hours beyond my master's toward my doctorate. So, for being a dummy, I did all right.
Is there anything you want to say to your fans out there to end the video?
I love you. Thank you for everything you've done. I hope that I haven't hurt any of your feelings over the course of the years. Everything I did was for the right reason, I thought. Sometimes I was a real idiot. That's the deal.
Thanks for being here today. It was a great interview.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.